Hello, hello,
Good
hello.
morning.
Can you hear that, Lee?
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Are we okay then, Karen?
You're live to go.
We're live. Very good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee, and I'm chairing it today because Chris Atwell is unable to attend. Limited seating has been made available. As you see, there are hordes of people here as ever. And there's a webcast to allow the people to attend remotely if they wish. The public seating area is not in view of the camera to be used during this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts assembled by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who's signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Obviously, we're being live streamed. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everybody use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. I will shout at you if you do that. If there is any voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. So I'll go around and count the hands. So I need to see the hands clearly because we don't want any misunderstandings. So what we're going to do is we're going to go round and just introduce everybody. I'll come to a little bit of housekeeping in just a moment. So, Karen, we will start off with you, and we'll go around the back today, if that's all right.
Good morning, Karen Martin from Democratic Services.
I've got Councillor Zachary over there.
Yeah, hi, Councillor Jason Fazackley, Nelson Ward, attending in relation to item 6 on the agenda.
All right, sir. Mate, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Mr. Cooper, representing MOD Housing, reference 35 Pembroke.
My name's Simon Hill. I'm here for the 1 Oliver Road application.
My name's Carrie-Anne Wells. I'm here for 16 North End Avenue as an agent for Applecore. Thank you.
I'm Eileen Brooks and I'm here for 19 Garden Lane.
Yes, sir.
I'm Richard Lacey. I'm here for 19 Garden Lane.
Okay. Are you guys, you're not making, so you're here out of interest of watching what's going on, all right? Thank you very much. Juliet. Anybody making deputations over here? Madam, who are you?
My name is Ashley Moore. I am part of the waste management team for Portsmouth City Council here in relation to H&E car spares. Number 6.
I'm Martin Harvey, agent for the applicant Portsmouth City Council in connection with item 6.
Good morning all, my name is Juliet Gill, I'm the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth City Council. I'm here to advise the committee.
Mary Valley, Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
Good morning, Chair. John Smith, Eastern Craneswater Ward Councillor.
Gerald Vernon Jackson, Councillor for Milton Ward.
Shall I just say again louder? That's it. Okay. Peter Candlish, Councillor Eastern Cranes Water.
Asghar Shah, Councillor Cosham, no interest to declare.
Raven Dent, Councillor for Copner Ward.
That's quite all right. My name is Nikki Reid. I'm a planner. I work for Coastal Partners. I'm here with my colleague Alex Pryor. We're here to speak on behalf of the South Sea Coastal Scheme application.
In the interest of openness and transparency, very pleased to have you here and to let you make that presentation. The same carry out. So, now I go to the agenda. I have apologies from the usual chair, which I've recorded already, Councillor Atwell. Are there any other apologies? I'm not hearing you for some reason.
Councillor Judith Smythe.
Councillor Judith Smythe,
Sorry.
all right. Okay. Any others? No. Councillor Brent normally here. So, no. So can you turn your microphone on?
Normally here, I haven't heard, but apologies from her, yeah.
Apologies from Councillor Brent. So a bit light today. So there are no other apologies then? Right. Very good. So the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of July, they're on the order papers. I was here only in the morning. So Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson, are you proposing them?
Happy to propose them.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder who's here all the way through the meeting? Councillor Smith. All right, got that, Karen? Very good. Members, any interest on any of the items? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on number 1, Oliver Road. I've objected to this. I'm going to make a deputation, but I won't take part in the decision. Secondly, on the memorial at the Hard, I've publicly said I support this and changed the council policy to allow it to happen. So again, I need to step out. I need to leave at 1 o'clock. So I expect we won't have got to the application on the Hard by then, but such is people know my view.
All right, we'll see how it goes because it might go on surprisingly quickly on the grounds that there are fewer members here today. And obviously, once you made the deputation, I believe, Juliet, he has to actually go outside because he's a member of the committee.
He's just objected to the application, so actually he can remain in the room. He just obviously can't participate in any of the discussion and voting.
All right, well, that's clear then. So we've done the minutes. Where's the planning officer? Oh, Simon, you're normally here. All right, very good. Okay. Simon, have you got anything you want to tell us about any of the decisions that were made last time? Anything to refer to?
I don't think so. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Okay. Good. So here we are then. So we're going to go into the South Sea Coastal Partnership application now, which is item 4 in your pack. You're probably there ahead of me, I should think. It's on page 21. Do you want to go ahead, Simon?
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the record, I'm the Interim Head of Development Management, Simon Turner. This is an application for...
We missed you earlier, the most important person in the room. We passed you by. Never mind. Carry on.
Thank you. This is an application for the South Sea Sea Defence Scheme. Some of the conditions resulting from the previous permissions. Members may recall that with the first decision taken about 4 years ago, members requested that some of the conditions come back to the Planning Committee for their determination, because otherwise normally they would be delegated to officers, and those conditions were concerning soft landscaping, external lighting, street furniture and hard surfacing materials. So with the various amendments and submissions over the years, this is the latest submission for those 4 matters, from the Pyramid Centre to Speaker's Corner. There are some general slides here just rehearsing the previous history and the wider scheme. And this scheme, this element is at the southern tip of Portsea Island, from the pyramids there across to Speaker's Corner, just this narrow bit in here. So there's the Pyramid Centre there and the rock gardens. So it's the stretch from the new rock defence into the sea there, across to approximately the end of Speaker's Corner, which is the triangular area of, at the moment, pretty plain landscape, hard landscape with the shelters facing on to the sea. So the stretch ends about here, although the details carry on further. So members may recall previously the amendments to the scheme for the general sea defences going in at this point, with the various engineering operations for the beach and sea defences and the promenade, levels, materials and so on, to provide the necessary protection for this part of the island. But as I said, this is a matter of the details of the conditions for soft landscaping, lighting, street furniture and hard surfacing. Landscaping is distributed across the site, mostly on the back of the promenade, and particularly also at Speaker's Corner, where members may recall a lot of hard and soft landscaping going in here, terracing, seating areas and a play area as well, and planting for this to become a particular focus and an improved facility as part of the sea defences. The soft landscaping, there are various raised planters along the back of the promenade, typically in front of the rock gardens, for example. There are planted terraces, planting beds, using flint to provide more of a natural barrier against weeds and making it easier to maintain into the future. And the habitats, there are evergreen, seasonal and evergreen trees and shrubs, seasonal plants and annual wildflowers. Some of the scheme has been in response from the original submissions to public feedback and to the landscape practice group, who've asked for various small amendments for species, for example, introducing more black pine and common alder. So the concept is for the planting to add interest and attractiveness, to soften the appearance of the hard landscaping otherwise. A lot of character relating to the beach, shingle effects, grass and so on, seaside type species, naturally to get the appropriate biodiversity as well as aesthetic interest. So they're aiming for year-round structure and colour. The flowering periods will go throughout the year, and that's been maximised to ensure that there's interest at different places at different times. And there'll be self-seeding and colonisation as well. Those are diagrams showing from the month across for the different species, the different types of evergreen, annual and seasonal, just showing the different interest as plants grow up and down across the months. So you can see how, for example, the annual wildflowers, they're not just grouped in, say, July, August, they're from the spring until the late summer to spread the interest across the season. Here's a palette of, sorry, it's very small for you, but to give you an idea of the sorts of range of species. You've got plants there on a pebble beach, obviously appropriate for this landscape. You've got Achillea, you've got poppy. I'm just picking out the species I know, Dicentra here, Hebe there, and different grasses. So a whole range of interest and variety. Some of these diagrams are not too clear, so I'll skip over these the detailed plans. Onto the external lighting. members will remember, we've got a mixture of the historic lamp columns, which are being retained and or repositioned more on the seaward side of the promenade, and new modern lighting towards the back, the landward side. I'll show you in a moment what that looks like. All of this fits in, I should say, with the wider scheme across the whole of the Southsea frontage, of course, to get a legible and consistent scheme in terms of character and quality. The different columns are various heights, 5 metre, 8 metres, 3 metres, 7 metres, but generally metal, smart, slim, modern, as opposed to the historic ones on the seaward side. Again, rather small diagram showing the distribution of the columns. There we are. So very slimline, modern metal columns, so as not to compete with the historic ones, and they're separated from them. Just some lighting diagrams to show the extent of lighting, fairly localised to the promenade, i.e., restricting spill beyond the promenade. The existing lighting's fairly low in the historic columns, a sort of orange glow I've seen, quite low, and so the new lighting will be to a slightly higher standard or higher illumination to make sure that the beach is usable for public safety, essentially, of an evening. There's some more details at the speaker's corner there. Onto the street furniture, so that's seating.
Sorry, could you just show the one on speaker's corner again, please?
This is the sea here, and that's the triangle of speaker's corner with the enlarged steps that's so big that you're able to sit on them, and areas of landscaping and play area, and then the open, hard landscaped area to the western side. Street furniture consists of seating, balustrading, handrails, bins and play areas. Again, following the style and design of the other frontages. So you can see, many of you will have seen already, the sub-frontage finished already at Long Curtain Moat on the edge of Old Portsmouth there. So that gives you an idea of the quality and character that's proposed, that I happen to think is very, very good. The balustrading and so on to be aluminium, so it's more rust resistant than steel, for example. So that's sensible. Just some of the images again. This is the briny area with the change in levels where you can actually seat. It's almost like a small amphitheatre type of arrangement, and more landscaping to the side. Scott's the pine there, for example, and the landscape play area here. Some of the planters at the back of the promenade, some of the more lighting, modern lighting columns at the back as well. The benches are typically in softwood, which will weather nicely and start to look like weathered timber you might find, a loose piece of timber on the beach. It's that sort of effect. Some are standalone, some are built into the terraces and so on. The intention with Speaker's Corner is it becomes a destination, and it's got the right form and character, I think, to achieve that, and location.
Can I ask a question at this point?
No, can you wait, please, if that's right, to the end of his presentation, and then we'll go into the next to the deputies, and then the questions. Is that all right?
My apologies.
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you. And then on to the last of the four conditions, the hard surfacing materials. These have been discussed with Historic England, amongst others, with different finishings agreed for the areas around more historic features, with a smoother etch around those such features, and away from those features a slightly rougher etch to distinguish, if you like, between heritage and the rest of the seafront. Again, that's following the existing pattern seen elsewhere. So there are other conditions that are outside of the committee's request, but those are the four areas that members asked to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. And now go to the deputations, then we'll go to questions from members. So, Nikki Reid from the Coastal Partnership, if you'd like to make your deputation, you have 6 minutes, okay?
Yep, thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for the opportunity for us to speak at committee today. It does feel very apt, actually, because we've had a whole load of EA flood alerts all across the South Coast today, and we are, as we speak, actually probably operating a full closure of floodgates, including the new gates at Subfrontage 1, so quite a lot earlier than we had anticipated, so it feels quite apt to be here today. We are very pleased to bring before members today the public realm details. This is our third phase, or will be our third phase of construction of the South Sea Coastal Scheme. And I don't want to repeat what Simon has said, he's given a very detailed presentation, but just to give you a flavour of like the wider picture, how we've got to this point with this design, and also a bit about what we're trying to achieve. So we've done a significant amount of pre-app on this, dating back to before I started, actually around about 2016. Up until present day, we're still doing pre-app as we come to each frontage. That continues both with the public, with the planning authority, internal consultees, external consultees, local community groups, specific users of the seafront, like cyclists or skateboarders, runners. And for this frontage in particular, we've held several in-person events. We've done a lot of engagement via our social media and via our website and newsletters, and actually the response we've had back has been very positive, which is great news for us. What we've tried to do in all of this pre-app and kind of as the design has evolved is really make sure that the seafront is sort of inclusive for everyone, for all users. Everybody wants to use it in a slightly different way. Everybody likes slightly different things about it. So we've tried to provide something for everyone, whilst maintaining that sort of coherent appearance. And that's what our design has really been about. It's to try and to create one coherent seafront, to give South Sea seafront its own identity in its own right, but we also realise that each sub-frontage has its own character and its own sort of, I suppose, slightly different appearance. So it's really, we've also tried really hard to retain that and enhance that character of those individual areas where possible. How we've tried to achieve this is through quite a small palette of high quality materials, which we're hoping to use or aiming to use for the whole seafront, but how we use them at each sub-frontage can change slightly. Again, helping to retain that specific character. So one example is the exposed aggregate finish. So we've had the first two construction phases have been really heavily dominated by heritage and scheduled monuments. So we've had a smoother finish that's been agreed with Historic England. It's the same surfacing essentially, but with a shallower etch, if you like, so the shingle doesn't show through as much. And then for the remaining promenade, for the rest of the seafront, there's a much deeper etch, so you can see that sort of shingle showing through. So that's what we're proposing as part of this sub-frontage. This is our first one without, there is a monument just slightly on the western edge, but this is our first sub-frontage that we're going to be constructing that isn't really dominated by a scheduled monument. The seating is another example. We've got very similar sort of style of seating. It's all in the softwood, but how we piece together that seating and the design of it, you can tell it's kind of on a theme, but we can really design it bespoke for each frontage. And again, what we've been able to do with this particular sub-frontage, because we've had a little bit more freedom, because it's not so closely linked to a scheduled monument, is to be a little less formal in that seating, make it a little bit more fun. We've got a play area in there. We've also been able to really put in a much more planting, so in front of the businesses and around Speaker's Corner. The same for the lighting. This is the first sub-frontage we've had where we've had the listed lighting that we've come to. So again, we've got the same sort of style or theme of lighting, if you like, but really with a very, very simple design, so we don't detract from those really beautiful listed lamp columns. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to respect the heritage and respect the character of the seafront as a whole, but really, I suppose, embrace what's special about each sub-frontage. Whilst I've got this opportunity to speak to members, I did want to just come back on a few points that have been raised previously. So you'll see.
If you could keep it.
Sorry.
Begin to round up.
Oh,
please.
okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Right.
So there's no public art shown on here. That's because the council are taking this forward separately, and I believe they are looking to appoint someone to bring forward a public art strategy. The large shelter, that is also being progressed in-house separately by PCC. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
It's amazing how time flies. All right. Okay. So that's it. We're up to questions now, members. Councillor Candlish.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to start with two apologies. Firstly, for speaking out of turn. But secondly, also, I'm not sure whether I should have declared an interest, but I'm going to do so now for to avoid any doubt. Although I don't front directly onto the area covered, I do have a flat close by that overlooks the seafront. So I'm assuming that I'm still okay to speak.
And this particular one, you're further down from this sub-frontage, I believe. But Juliet, can you make a ruling? You want to talk to him?
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. Members, whilst they're out talking, any other questions for the planning officer, please? Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson.
Thanks. So this is an area used extensively by skaters. What consultation had there been with the users of this space, and what proposals are there? Because this removes the shelter to replace a shelter for the people who use that. Is question one. Mary, of course, may be one of them.
My recollection from the last application was that there was no direct replacement, but that Nikki's just mentioned that being done separately outside, so work is going on that. Chairman, if we could go back to Nikki to ask about the specific question to do with consultation, because I'm not sure I have the answer to that.
All right, Nikki, I presume you're just about it back to the City Council.
Well, we have undertaken some discussions. I haven't done that myself, but I know at sort of high level within Coastal Partners, the proposals have been discussed with the sort of local skateboarders. What we've tried to do is really retain that large open space as much as possible, so that we're not sort of eroding the space that they have currently got. There are also details, so on the lower seating, on the plans you'll see like a very thin metal edge. I'm not a skateboarder, so I don't know exactly how they use it, but I'm assuming it's some kind of skid so they can still do that, but it won't be detrimental to the seating. And then in other seating, there are sort of anti-skate studs, so it's not a complete free-for-all, so you've got that balance between non-skaters and
all right, so there's
skaters.
balance there. I think the other question that Councillor Vernon-Jackson was asking between the two of you was about the 1950s shelter, is that correct?
Well, a shelter of some nature for them.
So as part of this planning application, as in for the main South Sea Coastal Scheme, the ones that we are doing that have got approval are essentially the listed shelters. So you've got the large black and white one, and then two of the yellow ones either side. The other shelter, that is, we're not able to progress that as part of our planning application, but it is definitely being progressed separately to us within PCC. I'm not able to give you much more information on that, but we can find out information and make sure you're kept up to date on that.
All right, well, that's in the minutes, so we'll have to chase that up, presumably with officers in the council. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
So can I go back to Simon's presentation? There was a picture when we were looking about like columns, and it looked to me as if we plonked one right in the middle of the open area, which is... So it's the one, I think that one. So just is that down towards, so where's the sea on there, Simon? The sea is down the bottom.
This is the sea, so we're looking north more or less.
And so in the middle of the open area, you've put a light column.
It's not entirely in the middle because we've got the amphitheatre type seating arrangement here and the play space and so on. So the retained open area is more along the western side. So I don't have an exact plan, I think, to hand, but I think that's towards the edge of the retained, more open area, Councillor.
Okay, I think that would worry me, and I would want it moved further to the edge, because one of the benefits of Speaker's Corner at the moment is that it's a large open area without impediment, and you put a thumping great lump of aluminium up in the middle of it. You'll have skaters running into it.
That's very kind of you. We'll come to comments for that.
Oh, sorry, okay.
That's all right. Can we go back to...
Okay, sorry, Chair, can I ask the applicant to make this is it possible to move it so it is not in the middle and it is on the edge?
Yes, we'll definitely look at that. I'm looking at the plans, and it looks like that one on the edge could possibly be one of the historic ones, but that's definitely something that we can look at if members are minded to.
That's very kind, thank you.
Yeah, very good. There was an artist's impression picture as well, Simon, wasn't there, of this area? Could we look at that, do you think?
Just a moment, please. It's towards the end, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Candlish has decided that he's got a personal and prejudicial interest, so he's going to remain out of the room until the end of the debate.
Yeah, well, that's sensible, thank you. Is that in any way helpful, Councillor Gerald Byrne-Jackson?
I can't see where it is, but that doesn't mean it's not there. But I'm happy to take the assurance that people will go away and look at it and move it if possible, and if it's in a difficult place, that's fine.
All right then, members. Any other questions, members? All right. That looks like the conclusion of the question, Councillor Byrne-Jackson. Anything else you want to add? All right. Okay, members, so we're going to come up for debate now. I'm going to move the officer's report. That's the first thing. I would like to say thank you to I'll come to you in a moment, Gerald. I'd like to say thank you for Nikki for coming on and give us a bit more detail. Members, because three of you here are very new. So what happened was a little while back, this application came to us as a committee, and I'm sure you've worked it out at least, and the committee decided, and in fact Councillor Smythe was very insistent too, that the conditions, that we looked more closely at these details. So we asked for it all to come back, not all of it, but the details to come back, which is why you've got the opportunity to look more forensically at the materials that are going to be used, where light columns are going, where the seating is arranged, and all these sort of things. So do we have a seconder for the report? Thank you, Councillor Byrne-Jackson. And I'll go on to say then that this has been done methodically and carefully in consultation with residents groups citywide to drill down into these details. We brought it back. It's, so far as I can see, I mean, South Sea Coastal Partnership are doing astonishing work around the coast of our city, not least to protect thousands of homes and businesses. But also they're being very careful with us as councillors looking at them and scrutinising them all of the time, and various groups scrutinising them all the time to reflect the heritage and the culture of the seafront and other places around our city. Let there be no doubt, though, as we've heard today, that sea levels are rising. That this isn't happening just because we want to do it. This is happening because we have to do it. Otherwise, the water's going to come over the top, and people are going to people's homes and lives might be ruined. So it has to be done, and the thing to do it is to seize the opportunity to enhance what we already have whilst respecting the character of the seafront. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Having voted against this at the previous meeting, I'm pleased that it's come back with details now, which have reassured me significantly, and therefore I'm happy to second the proposal.
Mr. Turner, do we need to put a condition on in some way to move that lamppost that Councillor Vernon Jackson was mentioning, or can we rely on the close partnership we have?
Yeah, we can't put a condition on a condition, but we can rely on it all being in-house effectively and proper working relationships and flexibility.
Great stuff. Councillor Smith?
I was only just going to echo what's been said. Really, it's I like the design. I like the fact that it's come back, so we can have another look at it. The sub frontage is really good, and the handshake with the old Portsmouth thing, the design, the way it's going to come to this area, I think it's going to be great. So I like it, but I do take the point that's been made about the lamppost and that what you've made. I'd like to make sure that's out of the way, because I'd like to keep that for the skateboarders and that, and it could cause a bit of a problem otherwise. Thank you.
Yes, it's very clear that Councillor Vernon Jackson has spoken up for those people who use the seafront in that way. This committee has spoken up for them. So thank you. Any other members wish to say anything? Right, so we move to, without further ado, we move to the vote. All those in favour of the officer's report, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Could we get Councillor Candice back in the room, please? So that item is approved, Karen. So moving on then to item number 5, which is 19 Garden Lane. Simon, do you want to start the report off? Page 31.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 19 Garden Lane, Southsea, for the construction of a single-storey rear extension, including a mezzanine level, to provide annex accommodation, following partial removal of an existing single-storey outbuilding. This is the site, edged in red. Just off St Edward's Road, just out of picture to the north there, running more or less east-west, and Castle Road just a bit further to the west, just to place you within Southsea. So Garden Lane is this narrow single access through to, essentially it's a cul-de-sac that runs along for 100 or so metres further east. So the property's at the corner here. The location of the extensions are at the southern corner, southwestern corner here. So you can note that the two neighbours in particular, the property to the west butts on, they back onto each other, shared walls, and then the extension also, the replacement buildings adjoins the property to the south, their back garden. I think I'll show you the photograph first actually of the property. So this is the view looking north towards Garden Lane. So the property is single depth, double width, and I said it had shared its wall onto the side of the adjoining property to the west. So at the southern end here, we have a link corridor with a couple of stairs down in it that links across to the garage, which is just sitting to the left. Sorry, I haven't got one picture that shows it all. So the structure to be removed would be this small link element and the garage, and replaced with the proposed extension. So if I go back to the plans, there's the link corridor and there's the garage. This is the proposed extension, so the same area, albeit a bigger footprint, and coming forward to the front of the property. I hasten to add, the site is in the conservation area and adjoins the Owens Conservation Area to the south. The property's on the local list. It's a locally listed building. dating from the early 1800s. I've got a more detailed plan of the proposal, but you can make the comparison in terms of position and footprint between the two developments. So there will be the same steps down from the property into the new extension. So it's an annex to the main dwelling retained. So it's another living room, effectively, sitting living room with a small kitchenette indicated in the corner and a shower room. And then a little ladder here to take you up into the mezzanine. So this southern third is a mezzanine bedroom in the roof space, effectively, because it is just on single story. And this is void above. That's a beam across. So 2/3 of the room is a void above the sitting living room. So there's the front elevation that I couldn't provide you in the photograph of the existing, the little link corridor and the garage. And that's the proposed extension. So not dissimilar general scale. The southern elevation as existing, the garage there has a single pitch roof rising to the west, which presents there. So the neighbour to the west in their back garden looks at the ridge of the single pitch garage, and then there's the lower linking element. The proposal is, you can't see it very well here, but I'll show you another image. There is a pitch, dual pitch, sorry, to the proposed annex extension. So the eaves height of the extension will be lower than the existing ridge there, whereas the roof pitch, the ridge line, of course, further away from the boundary, would be higher than the eaves. So you can see swings and roundabouts, if you like, in terms of the scale of accommodation relative to the neighbour to the west. We've got conditions on to get absolute clarity on the extent of walls to be retained and the materials as well, retention of bricks and so on, and new materials. So full details of that will be required. On the point of materials, they would, broadly speaking, of course, match the host dwelling, while the fenestration is more modern. This is the neighbour's view from the west, so there's the link block, there is the garage, and that's the wider view they have there. That's the view from the property to the south, looking north. So there's the existing garage, and you would have the replacement, which I shall find for you. There we are. So that's the existing garage, you can see. So this is what I meant about swings and roundabouts. So the height of the wall is reduced on the boundary there. For the garage, it's increased for the little link. So you have a new eaves height, and then the pitch rising away. And you can also see the limited head height in the bedroom for the mezzanine. So it's come to committee because of a call-in from Councillor Ian Holder, and I think we have deputations today from neighbours, but officers were satisfied with the scale and design and materials as proposed as an annex building. There's been an issue for neighbours around whether or not it is an annex or a separate dwelling. It's applied for as an annex, and that's how we're treating it, and we have a condition attached to confirm that as well. Lastly, bats. We had a survey done this spring, and there were no difficulties, no bats emerging from the building. Notwithstanding, we have a condition to control the lighting, to be sensitive for bats in the area, and to have a bat brick in the development to encourage bats to use the site. Thank you.
All right. Before Mrs. Brooks and Mr. Lacey give the deputations, we've all had a chance to look at this. We've all got a copy in front of us. Very good. I've looked at mine. Okay. Right. Mrs. Brooks, would you like to go ahead?
Well, my name is Eileen Brooks, and I live at 1 Sussex Road, which is the neighbour to the south of 19 Garden Lane. And you should have in your pack 2 photographs, one which has the end on it, which is actually the photograph of how the garden looks now, facing 19 Garden Lane. It's a very peaceful, mellow setting. There's a bird there on top of that chimney. And And the second photograph, you'll see what's going to happen to it. Instead of that nice mellow view, we're going to have a 14-foot building, the height of a double-decker bus. It's fully equipped with lounge, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. It has an external door. It's easily isolated from the main house. It has parking and it has garden lane access. Now, a number of people have complained about this proposal. Really, in particular, that this decision will set a precedent for building of houses on the basis of saying somebody wants another room, an annex. And although, obviously, we welcome restrictions on possible renting, are those restrictions really going to be applied in this day and age? And what we're asking is that either this is thrown out or that the height and the distance from the boundary are changed so that this cannot possibly be used as a separate dwelling or set a precedent for other people to do the same. Thank you.
All right, is Mr. Lacey still here? Ah, there you are.
Right. The committee report 25th of the 7th, 23 is anonymous. Who is writing this report? What is their qualification? Are they impartial? No apparent survey was carried out from the Sussex Road aspect, especially 1 Sussex Road. Why? The same committee report appears to depend solely on briefings from the applicant and their design team, which is to focus on 19 Garden Lane. Any objections from neighbours are dismissed. How equitable is this? The report is dismissive of some 11 objections. It states the extension is not considered to a result of any significant loss of residential amenity to any surrounding residential properties to the east, west or south in terms of light, overshadowing, outlook, increased sense of enclosure, privacy, noise, given the orientation of surrounding development and intervening distances. Well, you've just seen what's likely to happen there. Without a survey, how is this possible to state this? There is confusion as to just what is being proposed. Throughout the applicant's documents, it's referred to another room, single story, extension, annex. Just what is it? Is it just another room, as per the description in the original application? Why does it need a bedroom, kitchen, toilet, shower, supplemented by a mezzanine floor? Is it an annex? The definition of annex is self-contained living space, normally within a larger property. It has necessary amenities for someone to live independently. A kitchen, bathroom, and at least 1 bedroom. The purpose of the building an individual living space without any essential need is challenged. For a single-story extension, there are apparently rules. When a single-story extension is added to the back or side of a domestic property, it can be a maximum of 4 meters in height and up to 6-7 meters from the rear wall. If the building is within 2 meters of boundary wall, it can be no bigger than 3 meters height. The proposal is for 4.4 meters in height and sits either on the boundary wall or hard up onto it. The current height of the existing building is 3 meters. By going to 4.4 meters, the proposal is to increase the height by 13.3% of the permitted height. The increase in height to 4.4 expands the proposed building southern wall by 35%. This is the wall that backs onto 1 Sussex Road. Because of the increase in dimensions, it's not hard to see what this does for cramping, overshadowing, loss of light. To sum up, loss of residential amenities. This brings into the question of the mezzanine floor. The design team's statement regarding the application being a single-storey construction is smoke and mirrors. Conventionally, mezzanines are constructed between the space of 2 floors. The current building does not have 2 floors. What is being proposed is a 2-floor building with the second floor constructed in fresh air, but being disguised as a single-floor building with a mezzanine. To get the mezzanine in, hence the increase to a height of 4.4 metres, which given by the 4-metre rule by definition, it is a 2-storey property and not a single-storey building under any disguise. There are unanswered questions on footings. What is the proposal regarding footings? Will they extend into the neighbours' gardens, not least 1 Sussex Road? How will the increase of load be dealt with when placing a building onto old 19th century bricks? What consideration has been given to safety? The status of the wall is unclear. Portsmouth City Councils in the past have said it's listed. It has a connotation in regard to what can be built or what can be built on it and how close permanent structures can be built on it. The BAT survey, commissioned by the applicant and which appears to be accepted in the Planning Committee report as prime evidence without challenge. There are 18 species of bats in the UK. All are present in the south of England, yet the survey team could only confirm pipistrelles. The Eco Support Bat Survey falls on 2 counts. It was an activity count and not a population count. It counted only migrating bats. Experts note that the weather conditions on the days of the emergency and re-entry surveys are important factors as they can influence the bat activity migration. Weather conditions are not reported in the survey. On the 18th of May 23, the evening was partially clouded and a wind speed of 4.3 miles per hour. Not entirely the weather for bats to be active, but enough to keep them inactive for a low count. Authorities suggest that a timing of a bat survey is paramount. Surveys ought to be considered all seasons. Surveys need to be made in buildings in winter months. Bats often roost in inaccessible crevices. There may be no obvious signs of their presence on the outside of a building. Therefore, to establish if bats are present, a daytime preliminary roost assessment, followed by a further seasonal surveys of their species numbers and roost types should
All right,
be
Mr.
carried
Lacey,
out.
would you be kind enough to round up, sir?
Yeah, okay. There is the word in that particular report, unlikely. It's not a legal word and it shouldn't be used. It's either illegal or legal. The other observations are the point of the development is really, we're looking at back-to-back retrograde development relevant to the 17th century Portsmouth on there. And also consideration should be given that if this property is being used for other dwellings or for somebody to live in, then the increase in these dwellings is really going to affect the population of Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lacey. Mr. Turner, could you put up the sort of aerial view of the development? I think we want the committee to be able to see very clearly the distance between the. So my question is: does this development go right up to the boundary and onto the wall, or is it step back from the wall?
Right onto the boundary. The existing garage is right onto the southern boundary, and this development would also be on the southern boundary.
But not on the garden wall, shared garden wall, just to clear that up.
Yeah, the same boundary. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak?
No, Mr. Lacey, I'm sorry. So this will go. So this rear elevation will go up on top of the wall, which the wall forms part of the garage.
I can answer this question and several of the other ones if that would assist, or points raised.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I can answer that question and several of the other points raised if
Yes,
you would like
by
me to.
Mr. Lacey, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. On that first point, yes, it would be on the same line as the existing wall. And we've talked about the condition requiring details of the materials, how much of the facing brick would be retained, how much would be replaced in new material. So we're looking at the southern wall there. The objector has asked about the footings and loading, etc. That is dealt with by the building regulations and possibly the Party Wall Act for any works to the boundaries. So the structural side of things is outside of the planning permission assessment. To go through the issues raised by the second deputy, who wrote the report? The planning officer wrote the report. It's the report of the department. I checked the report and signed it off. There was a statement that the planning authorities relied solely on briefings from the applicant and neighbours' objections have been dismissed. That's not how I would put it. We have considered the objections raised, and if we have agreed or disagreed with them, we say so. We have also similarly listened to the submission from the applicant and agreed or disagreed. It is an annex, that is what is proposed for you, it's not a separate dwelling. If it were to become a separate dwelling, that would need planning permission and an enforcement investigation will be opened, and we have the condition to seek to control that and make that clear. So it has to be treated as an annex, that is what is applied for. The speaker was talking about the rules for development and gave some dimensions and so on. I think what he was reading out was the permitted development tolerances. This isn't permitted development, it needs planning permission, so those criteria are not relevant. It's a judgment on what is in front of us in terms of the effect on the neighbours. Whether or not it's single story, clearly internally there's no secret. There's a second story of limited head height, and that's 1.6 metres towards the middle. So it is essentially a single story externally, slightly higher of course, a single story and a bit. But let's not mind, that is what it is. It's all clear what is proposed. It's an extension with a ground floor annex accommodation with a bedroom fitted into the roof space by use of a mezzanine. The BAT survey, yes, of course, it was commissioned by the applicant. No one else could commission it. It wasn't accepted by the City Council without challenge. The survey was carried out by a qualified BAT specialist and it was assessed by a qualified ecologist at Hampshire. The speaker said that the wind conditions, weather conditions not reported. They were the temperature, the cloud cover, the wind, etc. So that BAT survey was a valid and correct document and assessed as such and found to be acceptable by the Hampshire ecologist. Thank you, Chairman.
All right then. And I have one further question. What's the difference from this? I've got it more clear in my head now. What's the difference from this boundary? It's not really a boundary wall, is it? Because it's I presume isn't owned by the objectors. It's owned by the people who are making the application. Not that that is a material planning consideration. What is the distance from that brickwork to the house? And did I notice a tree in between?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the distance from the rear element I've measured of the sort of outrigger to the property to the proposed extension is about 18 metres, if I've measured correctly. I don't know how clearly you can see it from here. There does appear to be, I would guess, deciduous tree, but a sizable tree on the boundary, which, if it's still there, I dare say it does provide some sort of intervention or intervening feature. In any event, it's a good size garden, 18 metres. Of course, the neighbours would see the change. That's been clear. We asked for the southern elevation. That is the change. There would be extra elevation, clearly slightly wider and taller, facing them at the end of their garden. But by the officer's judgment, that's not an unreasonable feature to have at the end of an 18-metre garden in a tightly packed urban area. It's a matter of judgment, but that is the judgment of the officers.
All right, my last question is, why isn't it permitted development? It's about a third of the, from what I can make, about a third of the size of the house.
Well, one or other of the dimensions will exceed the tolerances that the neighbour was referring to.
All right. Members, Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Chair, through you, could I ask Simon, my understanding this is a conservation area and therefore the rules that we have to obey are different than from most normal planning applications. And my understanding is we have to satisfy ourselves that any changes are going to enhance the conservation area and therefore it's much higher level of proof of requirements. Is that right, Simon?
Broadly speaking, yes, it's a bit more complicated than that, but broadly speaking, I mean, are there different rules? Well, in a conservation area, you have different parts of the National Planning Policy Framework applicable. It asks the local authority to consider whether or not there is any harm. If there is harm, there has to be public benefit to outweigh that harm. Less than substantial harm, it's termed as. The officers don't believe there is any material harm to the neighbours' amenities. Clearly, the neighbours have a different opinion on that, but officers believe that to be the case. So it passes the test there. There is no harm in officers' opinion. You mentioned the enhance, yes, from the 1990 Act. There's a duty to preserve or enhance. So preserve, neutral effect, or enhance. In this case, we would argue it's either a neutral effect, preserving character, or enhancing it, but it's certainly not negative. So it meets the policy tests that I think you were referring to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Smith.
Simon, can you just elaborate a little bit more on the condition of the materials? Because that end wall, is it going to be old bricks? Can you give us a little bit more detail on that?
Sure, we've looked at that with the applicant because it is important. It's good to have as least intervention as possible from the neighbour's point of view, less disturbance and so on, and retaining of materials is also good. You won't always know for sure how much you can keep until you actually start dismantling something. It's old, very old. The host properties anyway, the garage I dare say is much, much newer than that, but still fairly old. So that's why we've got a condition on, because it's not possible to be sure at this stage how much of the materials can be retained, what state they are in and so on, and therefore how many new materials and where's best to mix and match or do that. So it's slightly unknown. Further work will go into that on site if it's approved, and the details will have to be agreed with the local planning authority and with the heritage advisor if we feel that's necessary.
Any other questions, members? All right. We've heard all the presentation. We've heard the deputations. Anybody want to make a comment? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
If this was not in a conservation area, this would be really simple because it's just a development. But this is in a conservation area, and it's going to be attached to a building from the early 1800s, and it seems to me that the law is very clear that what we have to do is to look to make sure that a conservation area is supported and that we don't do anything that is going to harm a conservation area. I'm concerned that this is a two-storey building because it does have 2 stories, and that the height of the roof is substantially higher than the height of the current building, and my personal view is I don't think that enhances or supports the conservation area. If it had been a 1-storey building, then I think that might have been a different thing, but this is a 2-storey building, and therefore I would propose that we say no, that it therefore, because it harms the conservation area. I have no idea if anybody else will agree with me, but that would be my view.
I think when I read this yesterday and through, I've come here with an open mind, of course. I was looking to approve it, but it's on the boundary wall. You know, to me, it would seem sensible if I wanted, I would have moved this back away from the boundary wall by 1 metre or 2, so as not to upset my neighbours, and to show that I wanted to enhance and preserve the character of the conservation area. It's very difficult to say that it's overbearing because there's a tree in between and there's 18 metres between the two properties, so it's very difficult. So I think this is one that members, the newer members indeed, you have to have the wisdom of Solomon in this committee sometimes, well, more often than not. So these are very difficult and finely balanced judgments. Throughout the course of the discussion, my mind has altered. Not through drugs, but my mind has altered. And one thing I would say to you, sir, Mr. Lacey, is we do have very good officers in this council. And the report comes in the name of the senior planning officer, who's extremely well qualified. And Simon here is very well qualified as well. And the experts that we asked to look at these things, they are equally well qualified, and Mr. Turner teased all of that out. So what's to do, members? Personally, I'm tending to move towards Councillor Vernon Jackson's position. Was that this is out of character with the conservation area because of its... we would have called it a rear yard development years back, a rear garden development, and people have been jumping up and down on it, but that's happened more and more often. It's very difficult. Perhaps other members would like to come in before I firm my mind up. Councillor Vallely.
Vallely, thank you. I have to disagree. I think with 18 metres and a tree between, it's not objectionable at all to me. It's a nice shape. You know, it's about a matter of opinion on how things look on this case, I think. I would say it's okay.
All right, anybody else? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. Actually, 3 points, like my colleague mentioned about the conservation area, so that's one point I agree with him. The other one is 18 meter is of the neighbors left, not the applicant left. So this is the neighbor 18 meters. If they do apply or they do any development, then obviously that will be, there will be no garden.
Yeah, I really am seesawing on this. I was minded too. Could you put up the diagram which shows the rear brick wall and the additional height that might be achieved, is going to be achieved? And what is that additional height over and above the existing lean-to garage, Mr. Turner?
Thank you. And I should also qualify that the eaves of the current garage are about 2.2 metres there. So head height of a 6-foot person will be around about that sort of height. I should have qualified it to say in the report that the existing 2-metre end wall would be retained, and then you would build up beyond that. So a good matching brick or reclaimed bricks would provide the upper level of that south-facing elevation. So 2.2 metres to the eaves, existing, 3 metres proposed. The ridge of the existing is 3.9, 4.7 to the proposal.
Yeah, I did get that about the bricks and the brickwork. You know, reading the conditions, I suspected that's what was intended. All right, members, do we have a seconder for Councillor Vernon Jackson's proposition to reject this? Councillor Dent.
Yeah, second.
All right. So there we are. Anybody want to move the officers' report? Okay, and I'll second you, Councillor Vallely. So we have two propositions on the table. Which one? We take the first one, don't we, Juliet?
Chair, yes, the overturn was on the table first. I don't know if Simon wants to come back on that. Any comments on that first before you go to the vote on the overturn?
I think you need to, sorry about this, Gerald, but I think you can ask you to harden it up a bit somehow.
I'm sure Simon can find words that will help. He's a professional.
Chair, you're asking for a potential reason for refusal?
Yes, Simon.
Well, Councillor Vernon Jackson, you talked about being substantially taller and therefore you felt it was harmful.
So I think it's harmful to the conservation area because it's bigger and more intrusive than the current structure that is there, and therefore harms the conservation area.
Well, that's fine. I mean, if you want to give me 2 minutes to draft something in full, or there's no difficulty in doing that outside the meeting, it's up to you, Chairman Howe.
Sure. The committee's got the gist of what's been argued, so we can do that a bit later. So there you are, members. We've got Councillor Vernon Jackson's proposition to refuse the report, the application rather, and that's seconded by Councillor Dent.
Sorry, Chairman, to clarify, harm has been identified to the conservation area. Any harm to the neighbour's amenity?
I think that's, with an 18-metre gap, I think that's much more difficult to justify.
No, so I can't hear what's being said.
So just as the ladies wanted to speak, but the rules are once the public has speak, then the committee
I beg your
does
pardon,
discuss
she
it.
didn't have a
One
say.
point on amenity,
Yeah.
which is that we view out that window every day.
Yeah. So I have to think of how we're going to be able to defend this at an appeal with a planning inspector, and my view is that it would be difficult to convince a planning inspector not to give planning permission based on an 18-metre garden. So that is my...
I agree on that point entirely.
So therefore I'm not putting that in as a reason because I don't think it is... I don't think a planning inspector would support it, and therefore I think it is foolish to add that.
Can we just stop there a moment? Have we heard all the deputations on this at Garden Lane? Just not points, people.
You want to speak?
No.
Yes, there were two deputations. There was Eileen Brooks and Richard Lacey.
All right, I'm afraid I stick to the rules. I'm sorry, madam. We have to have rules on the... Well, I'm sorry you disagree, Mr.
clarify?
No. I'm sorry. We've gone through. We've got...
Nobody's been in my house to measure that 18 metres. It's 15 metres.
All right, thank you very much. The planning officers have their ways of doing this. Thank you both very much indeed. Right, so the proposition is there. Councillor Vernon Jackson's made it. Councillor Dent has seconded it for refusal. All those in favour of refusing the application, please raise their hands. Says Councillor, keep your hands up. Councillor Shah, Councillor Dent and Councillor Vernon Jackson. All those against the proposition by Councillor Vernon Jackson, that's myself, Councillor Smith, Councillor Vallely and Councillor Candlish. All right, so now we move to the officers' report, which I have, Councillor Vallely has moved and I have seconded. All those in favour of the officers' report, please raise their hands. So that's Councillor Candish. Put your hand up, Councillor Vallely, that's it. Councillor Candish, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Smith and myself. So the application is approved.
Hold on.
We just need to take the vote on the against the... You haven't done all the voting yet?
Oh, I thought I had.
No.
What didn't I
You
do?
need those against the proposal.
You've considered those who are in favour of the
Yes.
proposal.
So all those against the officer's report, please raise your hands. That's Councillor Dent and Councillor Vernon Jackson. I beg your pardon, members.
Any abstentions?
Councillor Shah is abstaining. You voted just now, so I'm not sure how you can abstain on something you've already voted.
He
for.
voted on a separate proposition separately.
All right, thank you very much indeed, everybody. But basically, the application is approved. Okay, so that's the end of that item. And now we move on to 16 North End Avenue. Mr. Turner, if you could make your report.
Thank you, Chairman. 16 North End Avenue. This is an application for the change of use from a Class C dwelling house to a 7-person sui generis HMO, house and multiple occupation. The application has come to committee because of 25 objections and a call-in from Councillor Weems. So the application site is towards the eastern end of North End Road, with London Road just along to the east. This is the application property, so it's a good-sized semi-detached property with the front door down the side of the house, a small front garden and a pretty good-sized back garden. There's the application site, small front and the back garden. This is more or less the end of the road and London Road running at an angle there. Another view from the north showing the back garden and the rear extension. With respect to the mixed and balanced community policy objective, in the 50-metre radius around the site, there are presently no HMOs. So having this one would take the percentage to 1.3%, below your 10% policy guideline. So the conclusion is that allowing this application would not result in an imbalanced community. In terms of the layout of the property, I'll just take you to the elevations first. So from the rear, you can see the hipped roof. That would change under permitted development to a gable end. So that's the hip there from the side, squared off to a gable end to produce extra accommodation in the roof. So the existing property has a lounge, stairs and kitchen, utility room, dining room and a conservatory. The conservatory would be removed, as you can notice there, that's gone from there. And 3 bedrooms at first floor, a bathroom and a storage room. There's the front door, I should have pointed out earlier, on the side. So with 8 bedrooms, it's 2, 3 and 2, 7 bedrooms I should say. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a large bedroom here with an ensuite. They all have en-suites. Through into the back kitchen diner, so retaining the rear structure, dining, kitchen and the further kitchen area to the side there, and a back door or French doors to go out into the garden. First floor ensuite bathrooms again, and a small tank WC room. And in the top story extended with the hip to gable, again 2 bedrooms and 2 en-suites. The report sets out the accommodation areas. Since all the bedrooms are 10 square metres or more, some of them just over 10 square metres, the 2 bay windows, the 2 bay rooms at the front are substantially over the 10 square metres at 24. Because of that, the required kitchen dining area is 22.5 and 28.19 is provided. And then all the en-suites comply with the standards, and on top of that there's the tank laundry room and wardrobe. So not only on size standards, but also the layout of the accommodation, officers are satisfied this would provide a good standard of accommodation for the residents. So those are the key features that members are accustomed to with respect to policy and those considerations of balanced community and living accommodation. There are a substantial number of objections on the range of issues one might expect around noise and waste, communal balance, community balance, parking, strain on local services, and so on, set out in your report. But on the two main points, as I've said, officers are satisfied the scheme is acceptable.
All right, thank you. Have we got Carrie-Anne Wells here still? You're over there. Right, do you want to make your deputation, Carrie-Anne?
As some of you know, at Applecore we are passionate about providing high-quality shared homes. We have an ever-growing reputation for high-end design HMOs for both students and young professionals. As you will be aware, Portsmouth size standards for HMOs demand some of the largest in the UK, and at Applecore we always strive to exceed that. During recent years, Applecore has led the way in terms of designing high-quality HMO accommodation within the city. The increase in quality HMOs is in part due to the high standards introduced by members of this planning committee, and also in part due to some of the clients I represent who share our passion for high-end shared living, which has only served to drive up standards within the city. I was unable to make the last committee meeting. However, having watched the recorded meeting and listening to a deputation made by Mr Thorpe, I can categorically state Applecore do not manage drug dens, as it was alleged. This is entirely untrue, which then leads me to question the truthfulness of the rest of the deputation given. It was also alleged that Applecore have a cram-them-in mentality. This is also completely untrue, as we always advise our clients to not exceed 6 bedrooms when the space standards cannot comfortably be achieved. All of the applications we submit fully comply with the high standards set in place by members of this committee. From our portfolio of managed properties, we have yet to receive a single neighbour complaint, and all have access to our details. The HMO density is put in place by PCC to ensure no more than 10% of properties within a 50-metre radius are in HMO use. This is to ensure mixed and balanced communities. Approving this application would result in a HMO density of just 1.3% of HMOs. Therefore, it can be argued there is a clear need for HMOs in this area to offer a variety of accommodation types. This application fully complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan. Also complies with the Housing Multiple Occupation Supplementary Document. Sorry, I've missed. All the bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres. The required communal area for 7 persons when all bedrooms meet the 10 square metres is 22.5. This property provides 28.19. All of the bedrooms benefit from an ensuite. This house could easily accommodate a 9-bedroom HMO. However, our client is keen to offer tenants high-end, spacious accommodation, and therefore this is a 7-bedroom application for single occupancy only. Bedroom 1 and 3 are 24 square metres, which are double the size required. However, our client is keen to offer tenants quality accommodation, which aligns with our vision at Applecore to provide high-quality shared living. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation, saving the time and cost involved in taking this to appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Members, any questions?
Chair, can I just check with the Democratic Services Officer if she's received anything from Councillor Weems, because he's down to speak.
Yes, both ourselves and planning had a email in from Councillor Weems yesterday. I could bring it up and read it out if
I haven't seen that. And we also have a deputation from Councillor Zackley, who asked earlier on today. So in the interest of our openness and transparency, Councillor Zackley, do you want to make your deputation?
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of points, actually. I didn't ask earlier today. I objected some time to this and asked this to be brought to the committee today. I have some questions I'd like to put as ward councillor to the planning officer, because there are some flaws in this report and some clarification I think that certainly I would like, and there are several residents here today as well, and I'm sure they would appreciate some clarification from the planning officer. So can I ask the questions these are factually, it's not a speech, it's relevant to the report, then I've got my deputation.
Sure. If you make your questions in the form of the deputation, so as you go through the deputation, ask the questions, Mr. Turner will note them down, and then at the conclusion of your 6 minutes, he'll come back to you with the answers. All right?
Okay, in that case, I'm going to have to try and rush this through because I'll do the best I can. Okay, very quickly, the questions that I'd like the officer to pick up on. First of all, I objected to this. I'm grateful for Councillor Weems' intervention, but quite why it's not listed me down as bringing this in the first place. Maybe that could be amended. On the report itself, a couple of things. First of all, 8.40 relates to the monitoring and control that will exist via licensing. Sorry, I've got my wrong glasses on for this one. So via the licensing regime. The report notes this is not currently an occupational condition, but it could be imposed as such, even though this is not considered necessary by planning. I'll be asking members to do just that, because every safeguard is needed by residents. However, I suspect that may be overtaken by my last question. Impact on SPAs, can the officer clarify to me so the residents are aware that the Section 111 agreement, the report states on page 47, 8.28, that one is required and the applicant has agreed, but this is not noted in the conditions on page 49. How is this checked to determine an agreement is reached, and should this not be included as a condition? My main thrust is in regards to parking. Page 48, 8.36, reference is made of parking, and also under 2.2 we've got the reference made to a garage that is opposite to the application site. Has planning actually assessed the volume of daily traffic movements that relate to this garage? The report details it as a small garage. Sounds very nice, doesn't it? A nice small garage. I've represented this ward for decades. This garage adds considerable amount of traffic flow to the area, both by on-street cars that are left whilst they're waiting for work to be completed and by vehicles accessing, being collected and delivered to the actual garage itself. I'd like to know, did you assess that? Because if you did, I can't believe the laughable comment that you'd only need an extra 1/2 a parking space should this application be agreed. This council, as every other council should do, needs to check that safety is paramount. I would ask, if planning does not come back and say they've conducted a proper traffic survey on this, that you need to defer this to get that. Would any of you be comfortable including or voting for an application where that information is not known to you? I go on my personal experience. We all have experience with our own wards. I appreciate some members are newer than others, but you'll get to know, if you've not already done so, that over the years you as a councillor will get to know your own ward. And what's in black and white on planning legislation is often not the reality at the coalface, as they say, when you see what the impact is upon your residents. 25 objections have been received, as is mentioned. That's a fairly significant number, certainly in the cases that I've dealt with over the years. So you can appreciate why members are concerned. Even Councillor Weems, he's from a neighbouring ward, Hilsey Ward. I'm not sure of his reasons for objection, but I'm grateful for the fact that he feels concerned and has raised those as well. The difficulty that local authorities have got, of course, is trying to deal with this in relation to national planning legislation. And there clearly, certainly in my opinion at least, is a difference in what happens on paper compared to what happens in reality. This particular application, whilst painted in a rather rosy light by the applicant's agent, I would say sadly follows that trend. Also, sorry, come back on a point I also mentioned, the planning officer mentioned that he could see very little difference in there being a family of 7 in place or a family of 7 unrelated individuals. Interesting comment that he made. I'd like to know if he could clarify that for me. I've seen HMOs throughout the ward and throughout the city where these have come in, there's a reference made to bike space, you know, and several of these, well, I wish I'd have brought some more information with me, but lots of them you see the bike space is never used, and that every occupant, if they're of working age, comes along and gets a car. the same you're having here is potentially 7 more vehicles added to a road where the application site is immediately opposite a busy local garage. Okay, it doesn't add up, and the half a space, as I mentioned earlier, just seems absolutely ludicrous. Members, I'd ask you. You are bound by legislation. I appreciate that, but I think you do need to make a stand on this one. You do need to search your conscience and think, if the planning department can't give a detailed answer to what they've done in regard to assessing the level of traffic on that site because of that garage, then this should be deferred at least, if not rejected, to get that information to come back first of all. We have to protect residents. We have to protect their safety first of all. And this, to me, in my personal experience as a ward councillor, is not acceptable because it seems to almost dismiss the fact that the impact that garage already has. So members, please bear that in mind. I hope the planning officer will respond to me, but I hope if you don't kick this out, that you will at least defer it to get that information first of all. So when we do come back here, at least in your own minds, you can determine the fact that the safety issue is at least resolved, if it can be. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Fazakerley. And I'm sure that Mrs. Martin over there has noted your representations that you called it in way back, but for some reason it's not shown, it's not reflected in the report. So I'll record it in the minutes that we'd like this just looked into to see what happened and see if we can put it right. Mr. Turner looks like he might have a... Sure. Mr. Turner looks like he might have an answer already. So I'll turn now to Mr. Turner to respond to some of the questions and comments that you made in your representation, Councillor Fazakerley. I beg your pardon, sorry. What was the resolution over Councillor Weems's representation, if any?
The Democratic Services Officer offered to read it out. He sent it in yesterday. He's down to speak, so...
Yeah, I think that's important since he sent it in. If you would like to read it out, or Mr. Turner, if you read it out.
Thank you. Okay, shall I do Councillor Weems attend to his submission, then come back to Councillor Fazakerley's points? So this is from Councillor Weems. Apologies to the committee, unable to attend today's meeting, but would be grateful if members could look into the application with the usual precision and depth of thinking. As outlined in the report, this application sits next to one of the arteries of the city. There is no parking, there is excessive noise pollution, constant traffic from cyclists, buses, e-scooters and pedestrians close to the property. Section 5.7 speaks about amenity and parking, with section 5.9 stating the minor increase of occupants is not considered to have a demonstrable impact on the parking need and thus parking availability in the wider area. It is noted that the Council's adopted parking standards within the associated supplementary planning document has the same expectation for the number of parking spaces, 2 per dwelling, for any scale of HMO with 4 or more dwellings. I would be interested to know, says Councillor Weems, how many people in this property use a vehicle. I imagine it's more than the policy gives. Furthermore, pushing an extra people into a house with very little light and very little ventilation is not something I can support. It shows greed more than anything else. Councillor Weems has lived in HMOs with over 5 people. Frankly, they're awful. The properties in this city do not cater to that amount of people living under one roof. I know that some on this committee have too lived in HMOs and can empathise with these thoughts. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Turner. And your responses to Councillor Fazakerley then.
Thank you. On the question of Councillor Fazakerley's representation, the case officer has said she was contacted by Councillor Fazakerley. He stated he would be submitting an objection, but we don't appear to have received that, which would explain the lack of that. Councillor Fazakerley asked about the occupancy condition discussed very briefly in the report. That comes up frequently. Councillor, members will decide whether or not they feel it's necessary, if it's approved, to have an occupancy condition to clearly restrict it to 7 persons. That is in the development description, but members are entitled to impose such a condition if they wish for absolute clarity. Councillor Fasackley asked about the special protection areas mitigation, the Section 111 legal agreement, not noted in the conditions. How is it checked? It needs to be a condition. The resolution, recommendation 1, requires the satisfactory completion of a legal agreement. That is the Section 111 agreement. So if not already agreed, the applicant, and if this is agreed today, the applicant will complete that standard legal agreement. That will be checked by officers, and that will be enable the development to be approved in compliance with the legislation. Then really we're coming on to the issue of parking and traffic. I don't think the Highways Department are in the habit of taking traffic counts for these sorts of developments. They would do that for substantially large developments. They would look at the application site and its surrounds, I'm sure. Whether or not they noticed there's a garage opposite, I don't know. But I think their answer would be indeed the level of traffic generation and parking associated, or the difference between a good size family dwelling house that could be accommodated by a number of people in a family compared to an HMO where you know what you're getting. It's going to be up to 7 people if approved, but a house could have a similar level of accommodation. So in terms of parking and traffic generation, they don't raise an objection because they don't see a substantial difference. That really is the answer to the questions of parking and transportation.
All right then. Any members, we turn now to questions. Councillor Vernon Jackson, a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Simon, could you go back to the floor plan, if that would be possible? Thanks. So, that's very, very helpful, Simon. Thank you. The concern I've got, and we might not like HMOs, but government planning inspectors regularly overturn our decisions to allow them to happen, and we've got to be mindful of that, is we've got a space standard about the area for the communal area. And that's drawn, and it looks as if it's got a cooker and a sink and a table. I can't see where there is space for a fridge freezer, or for anywhere for sofa or anywhere. I see there's a table there. My concern is that we have a space standard, and quite a lot of this looks as if it's a corridor for people to, and therefore that is not livable space. It's not space that's of any use nor ornament to anybody. If that's so, how do we treat the sort of corridor bit of it? Should that be deducted from the space that is there as communal living space? Because it's not, it's a corridor.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we looked at the area quite carefully, as you would hope. This area on the left-hand side is an existing utility room that has a separate wall and door at the moment, so that would be opened up, and that along the side there is a top with underneath fridge, freezer, washing machine, etc. So that's sort of the utility side of the kitchen, if you like, put to one side, and cupboard space and so on. So there's a long range of, for 7 people, as well as where you've identified the sink and the hob and so on. And then you've got seating space for dining and even sitting at the back. In terms of sort of corridors, I don't know if you meant this area. Yeah, okay. So that's sort of working space in front of the cupboards and washing machine, etc. Yeah, so there'd be no deduction as such. I'd say that was all usable space.
Thanks, Simon.
Question following on from that. Mr. Turner, the communal kitchen stroke dining area at 28.19 metres is required, but 22.5 is being offered because all the bedrooms exceed 10 metres squared. Does that communal space include the area that Councillor Vernon Jackson's just been talking about, that for want of a better, that corridor bit.
Yeah, to be clear, the 22.5 in the right column is the required amount, the space standard, yeah, and then they would provide 28.
I'm sorry,
so they would provide a room bigger than the minimum standard. But as we've been talking about already, it's not just a question of size, it's a question of layout and function and so on. And in my opinion, there's not really a corridor. There's a working space in front of a range of kitchen facilities built into the wall there.
So when we're looking at communal space, are we supposed to, or are we allowed to look at what would be the kitchen? And if we weren't, the communal space would therefore be the so-called dining square, and that bit to the more towards the garden with the open doors. What would that area be, Mr. Turner, separate to what would appear to be the kitchen area?
We haven't measured that because it's all one room, so we wouldn't try and separate them out. The standard looks at a shared kitchen, living, dining space, and that's the 22.5 in this instance. So we haven't sought to measure them separately.
All right, it looks about just about half and half to me. So my guesstimate on the actual communal space is about, sorry about this, is about 10 to 11 metres squared. What I see as communal space. Mr. Candice, you look like you would like to say something.
I was asking questions of a similar nature. So the empty area with the doors going out into the backyard, what is the approximate dimensions of that? Because just by the table that is marked, there are 2 intrusions into that space. So I think that also creates some unusable space. So assuming that the space by the doors is big enough to get a sofa in underneath the windows on the left and right, we're asking people to go past the table to get in there. I mean, it all doesn't feel like the criteria is usable space, and it does not feel usable.
Is there any way of getting any slide rule onto it at all, Mr. Turner, to try and give us an idea?
We could, but I'd just warn against that. We don't do that in terms of the guidelines. I think it's perfectly acceptable to reach a view individually and collectively on the quality of the arrangement with total size and disposition, layout of the room. It is called combined living space, so there's no way of saying whether 10, 11, 12 metres for the kitchen, half of it is right or wrong.
Yeah, that's fair enough. A better question then is, do you agree that we've had the planning inspectors, these are government planning inspectors, they have agreed with this committee before when we have refused applications on the grounds that the layout and the configuration of the proposed communal space does not lend itself to communal space, and they have agreed with us in the past when we have done that.
Well, we have had appeals dismissed and allowed, so decisions both ways, obviously based on the merits of each and every one. So,
I agree it's subjective. All right then, any other, there's also been questions on parking raised by Councillor Zachary and indeed Councillor Weems. They argue that because there's a busy garage located nearby, that the highways the highways officer does not seem to have paid enough attention to this particular proposal. First of all, can you just confirm that the paragraph 8.23, 8.21 on, this has been sent to the highways officers and they've looked at it in some way and they've come back with their report?
That's right. They would have looked at the application and the site and surrounds and reached their view, as I say, based as much as anything on a comparative occupation between the two current and proposal in terms of parking and traffic generation. That's their position.
And their position is it's half of a car extra. That's what they say. And would you also confirm that when I moved a proposition to throw out a similar HMO in Twyford Avenue, we argued it on the merits of a half a car increase, and the planning inspectors came back and said no, that is not reasonable, and they allowed the appeal.
Yeah. Yes, your memory is better than me, but that, what you've just outlined wouldn't surprise me, and indeed that I think would have been the officer's position as well, giving public transport and location to shops and services.
Yes, that's now occupied by nurses for the QA, by the way. All right. Any other questions, members? No. I'm sorry. We got to move to comment then. So, look, I'm uneasy about this. I think that it needs to have a condition put on it in any event that it should be limited to 7 people if it were to go through. But I'm going to move a proposition to oppose this. What I will say to the newer members is it is very important. Communal space standards are really important, particularly as you heard Councillor Weems touch on his, that he previously lived in a busy HMO. And so it's very important, communal space for the intended residential occupiers, to me, is very important too. And it's no doubt whatsoever that the configuration in this case does not lend itself to communal space. It really is pushing the boundaries. And I think that people living in a busy house like this will need more communal space. At the moment, if that means a reduction in one of the rooms, so be it. But at the moment, I think that the communal space doesn't meet our space standards. The configuration and the layout of the kitchen, the way people would move it around, it means that the communal space standards will be compromised, and I'm completely satisfied myself that if a planning inspector went there and looked at it, he would agree. He may even look at the paper and agree. Indeed, on occasion, and a case not quite as, in my view, in the nicest possible way, not as intense as this, the planning inspectors agreed with the proposition. So I'm going to move to refuse the application. We really can't do it on parking grounds as much as we would like to. We have so many appeals about this, and all we do is waste money, your money, council taxpayers' money. Sorry, sir, you can't say. So that's my proposition, is to throw it out. I must say, we're in the middle of the debate. I mean, if you had yourself down for a deputation, it would be all right, but you just can't intervene. I'm terribly, terribly sorry.
I'm a believer of freedom of speech, so I'm new to all this. So I'm just a resident living there.
No, not just a resident.
And for the infrastructure of sewer, everything.
Yes, sir. I don't know your name. And if I could get your name first of all.
Peter Robson.
Peter
Robson.
Robson.
And I've been there for 40 years.
Yes.
And the changes is unbelievable. You've got HMOs in every road.
And
it's getting tough, yes, but it is that strict parking space.
Sir, I'm sorry, Mr. Robson, you can't do this.
I'm looking at the whole area. I'm a community. I believe in
Mr.
people.
Robson, I'm terribly sorry, sir. We're in the middle of the debate.
Okay, all right. There's one issue. It's the water pressure. We had trouble a few years back with water pressure, and there was a water board down bloke doing some repairs. And I said to him, "We're not getting a lot of pressure down here." And he said, "Why? It's because they're turning these places into flats. Now you've got HMOs and that. If you want 2 hours to fill a bath, then you can live that way."
All right.
Sorry, but you've got to think of the community. It's not just one person trying to make money. You've got to think of the whole street. I know you've got things to follow and that, and I respect that. But I'm a person that believes in the community. Not one person to make money and that's it, and go off. We got to live there. We got a garage that was a post,
Mr.
and that,
Robson,
but
we've picked up on your points, we really have, sir, and we understand them, and we hear it at almost every single committee.
I know you do. But it's about time we make a stand.
Sir,
We're only in an island.
Mr. Robson, we do make stands, sir. So
I'm sorry to interfere.
You're not interfering, sir.
I know there's procedures, but I'm new to this. But
yeah, we very much understand. Thank you very much for raising those points, Mr. Turner. Since they've been raised, would you please address the issue around sewerage, pressure, and the water systems? In fact, we could throw GPs, we could throw hospital places in, all these other. What is it the committee is allowed to consider when coming to its conclusion?
Thank you. Infrastructure is wide and varied: roads, GPs, schools, water. So it's varied, and there'll be slightly different answers for different aspects of infrastructure. But broadly speaking, individual planning applications for a development of this size doesn't bring into question making some sort of compensation or refusing an application, partly because it's not considered that the level of occupation of one dwelling house as a family dwelling house is so different from 7 people living there as an HMO. So that's one reason why we wouldn't propose any reason for refusal on those grounds or mitigation. All those matters of infrastructure are dealt with variously through central government funding, either directly or indirectly, by grants to the local council, the funding there, the revenue there, and the local council, of course, has its own spending as well, derived from council tax, central government spending, etc. And there may be elements of community infrastructure levy as well, depending exactly what we're talking about. So it's wide and complex.
Indeed. So, and it's my experience in this committee, Southern Water will just say they can connect to any application, and I've never heard them refuse to connect to any application ever. And of course, on the GPs, which I've raised, but others raise frequently, this is a matter for the clinical commissioning group, and they look to match the number of GPs. I mean, we could go on ad infinitum. We've got to build 17,000 more homes in this city. That's not our decision. That's a government instruction, and it was reinforced recently by Mr. Sunak. So we have to stick to the planning merits of the discussion. I've given Mr. Turner my reasons for the refusal. Do I have a seconder? I've got Councillor Vallely. Okay, must get this right. Any other councillors would like to make any propositions or come in with any comments? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
So I sit through these committees on a regular basis, and every single application for a super HMO has to come to this committee because I call every single one in. Because I don't like HMOs, but we have to look at them on an individual basis. The government policy is very clear that they want development and they support having HMOs, and we have limited powers. Our MPs of all parties choose not to give us powers to say no to HMOs. We do, in Portsmouth, we are probably the strictest council anywhere in the country. In Fareham, Gosport, Havant, etc., you don't even have to ask permission. You just change your house to an HMO, you don't have to get planning permission. In Portsmouth, you have a 10% rule. In Southampton, it's 20%. So we've done it twice. Our deal is better. I am concerned, though, about saying no to something here, knowing that the applicant will go to appeal, if there is not a justifiable reason in planning law, because all that means is it goes to appeal, and then the developers get awarded costs which council taxpayers have to pay out of their pockets. And I don't like wasting taxpayers' money. So all of these things are a matter of judgment. Like you, I thought that the area that in that communal area looked like a corridor, but Mr. Turner has given me what I think is a reasonable answer. We know that if we object and say no on the grounds of parking, the inspector will just laugh and say yes, they can have planning permission, and we just know that is the case. So I am concerned that saying no to planning permission just gives the illusion that this won't happen, knowing that the applicant will go to appeal and knowing that the appeal will be successful and that therefore the planning application will go through, and it'll just cost council taxpayers more money to pay the developers' lawyers' bills. So it's a... if people come for one of these meetings, and that can look defeatist, but if we've been here for year after year fighting these, we have to learn sometimes from experience. So I thought I would be moving everything to say we should say no to this. Having had Mr. Turner's explanation, I don't think there are grounds that are defendable, and therefore I won't be supporting a refusal.
All right, and just to clarify my position, members, is I'm really confident that a planning inspector looks at this, he will decide that the joint kitchen, so-called communal space, I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Smith, is not really communal space. There is a difference between the two. The configuration and the layout does not lend itself to what you would call communal space. And we have done this before in a similar one, and the planning inspector agreed with us. I can't hook it out right now because there have been so many, but I think in this case, that is where I'm sticking to, I've made that clear. Mr. Turner, have you got the reasons? The internal layout configuration does not amount to communal space, therefore does not meet our policy.
It would be along those lines. It would be, it is considered that the configuration and layout of the combined communal space is unsuitable, and therefore would not provide adequate living conditions in conflict with the policy. Yeah.
All right, that's where I am, members. And there was Councillor Valali seconded that. Councillor Smith, your views.
I was just waiting for a comment, really, that was all. I thought we were still on comments, aren't we? Yes. Yeah. So it's just about the kitchen dining room and the corridor we've been mentioning a lot about. I was just saying, if you move that jab back and move the doorway back, you'd actually make that a much more workable space. I'm sure they'd need a steel and that, but you could actually make that a more workable space if you did that. It might just help the problem.
All right, well that's great. I'm sorry, Kev. We can't go backwards and forwards like some of us would like to. All right, so we have a proposition on the table. I don't think anybody's moved the officer's report yet. So we only have one proposition on the table, which is to refuse, unless anybody wants to move the officer's report. All right, so there's the one proposition, Juliet, which is to refuse for the reasons stated. All those in favour of the refusal, please show their hands. So I've got 1, 2, myself, and so I've got Councillor Candish, Councillor Valali, myself, Councillor Hunt, and Councillor Dent. All those against the refusal, please show. That is Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Shah, and Councillor Smith. So the matter is refused. Okay, so now we move on. I think what I'm going to do is vary the. I'm sorry about this, Mr. Hill. We're going to vary it to go to the monument at the back. I think we can do that quickly, Councillor Vernon Jackson, because we won't get through Oliver Road that quickly, but at least we can get to one of yours. Is that all right? Would you like to do that? I think it's important because you worked so hard on that. So we're going to go to item 10, members, the obelisk.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Agenda item number 10 at the amenity area at the Hard in close to the Royal Naval Dockyard. This is an application for the construction of a memorial obelisk to commemorate the sinking of HMS Royal Oak. So here we have the Hard, just where it turns the corner north to go back into town. You've got the main historic gate into the Naval Dockyard, Mary Rose, etc. So Warrior is just off here to the west in the harbour, and the pubs and shops and so on here. And then general public space on the frontage here behind 4 London plane trees. There are the 4 London plane trees. This is an elevated area of hard standing, just a curb height elevated open space really with the trees. We've got the Mudlarks statue just a few metres away to the north, and the proposal is in the middle of the area. So that is looking northwest out into the harbour. So Gosport's opposite there. That's the train station on the left-hand side. Warrior there. Here are the London plane trees and the area behind. I think that must be the Mudlarks statue there behind the tree. So the proposed obelisk would be just about behind this shelter here in the middle of that area. In a bit more detail, there's its location. It is 2.6 metres tall, made of approximately half a metre wide and deep, so square in footprint, made of granite, Abbey Grey granite. I should have said we're in the conservation area, and there are other heritage assets, nearby. It's come to the planning committee because the site is owned by the city council. So it's an application to provide this memorial. Lots of memorials around the seafront and other parts of the city indeed, Victoria Park and so on. So it's the sort of thing we're used to seeing. There's no need to justify the reason for the obelisk, but it is by the HMS Royal Oak Association for commemoration. As planning officers, we have no objections to this form and position and materials of such a structure. As I say, it's relatively commonplace along the seafront and particularly in this part of the city. So we're happy, including the Heritage Advisor, with its scale, position and materials. We have a condition for details of the joins and junctions and the lettering, and a tree report to make sure that when it's wheeled in or winched in, it's not knocking off branches from those trees. We do have an objection from the Portsmouth Society on various matters set out in the report, but for the reasons given, officers wish to approve the application.
All right, members, there's no representations. We have got representations from the Portsmouth Society. Is that going to be read out at all, Mr. Turner?
Only if you want me to.
Well, I don't see the need. It's laid out here in paragraph 5. The summary is put there, so thank you very much. Any questions, members? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Could I do my deputation?
Of course you can. Do it from where you are.
Yes, it's very short. It's just to say that people from the Royal Oak Society came to see me. This was a Portsmouth-based ship that sank at the beginning, or was sunk by enemy action at the beginning of the Second World War, and many hundreds of Portsmouth residents lost their lives. It's commemorated at Scapa Flow, where I went last summer, but I think it is absolutely right and proper that it's commemorated here in Portsmouth as well. So I ran into a bit of council policy that said we have too many monuments already and we shouldn't have any more, which I completely disagree with. I think it's really important that people know and understand the history of this city, and therefore if something like this does mean that people learn and understand something of our history, then I think it's a good thing to do. So I completely support it. I will take no part in the debate or the vote, but I hope colleagues will support this.
Right, members, any questions? No. So I'm going to move the officer's report. Completely agree with you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Really surprised to see the comments and the words of the Portsmouth Society. I didn't really understand it. And, you know, a bit of an affront to what is intended, and it seemed to be unnecessary to me. I can't completely agree. It will add, you know, everything's been done to make sure it's situated in the correct place with the gravitas that it deserves. So I move the officer's report, and seconded by Councillor Smith. Any alternative propositions? None. So we'll move to the vote then. All those in favour of the report, please raise their hands. That is unanimous. Thank you, members. All right. Is that all right, Councillor Vernon Jackson? Thank you very much. I don't think we could do Oliver Road in 20 minutes.
Well, in which case, can I do my deputation?
Yeah.
And are you going to then stop for lunch? But I'd quite like to do my deputation before.
Well, I don't like stopping for lunch unless members really want to. I'd rather press on, but it's up to members.
In which case, then I'll stay to do my deputation, but then as I can't take part in the vote, I will then disappear.
Is that all right with you, Julia? I think that's a sensible way forward. All right. Do you need to hear the officer report, though, first of all?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Turner, do you want to present Oliver Road?
Thank you, Chairman. 1 Oliver Road. This is an application to change the use of a Class C3 dwelling house to an 8-person house of multiple occupation. It includes the construction of a single-storey rear extension following the removal of the previous structures and reconstruction of the boundary wall, the eastern boundary wall to Hellyer Road. The application has come to committee, calling from Councillor Vernon Jackson, also because of 36 objections. To make sure I don't forget, Chairman, we should have attached a water efficiency condition related to nitrates and the SPA. So could I just verbally say, in the event of the application being approved, we need a water efficiency condition, which we had attached number 4 to the previous to the item at 16 North End Avenue, just to save time reading it out. It's to achieve water efficiency, to do with the harbours.
Right, well, that's noted in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the merits of the application. Number 1, Oliver Road. So, although it's addressed on Oliver Road and it has a frontage there, it's one of these Portsmouth properties that turns the corner and has the front door onto the side road, or the other road, Hellyer Road in this example. Located here just to the north of Highland Cemetery. So there's the site frontage on Oliver Road, and then the return elevation here, the side elevation that has the front door on it nevertheless, and then a collection of a side wall that encloses the yard, the garden yard, and some elevations of the rear extensions currently. The existing rear dormer window would be replaced by a larger dormer extension under permitted development. With respect to the mixed and balanced communities, the HMO data count within the 15 metres, there are 3 identified properties, including the property itself has come up as a potential HMO already, so that the percentage wouldn't change from the count existing. The count is 4.28%, so below the 10% threshold in the policy for mixed and balanced communities. The existing site, so there's the front door and habitable rooms leading back into the back of the property, and a sort of run of a rear wing of different rooms facing onto the yard, and I think that's a garage. And then bedrooms upstairs and in the existing roof space with 2 dormer windows, providing 1 bedroom up there. That's existing. So the proposal is to, as I said before, to remove all of the rear wings at ground floor level. They will be replaced with a large new communal living space of kitchen and living area. And then we have, it's 8 bedrooms, this one, isn't it? 3, 3 and 2. So 3 on each storey, ground floor, first floor, and 2 in the roof. Each bedroom has an ensuite. And as I mentioned, the general shared amenity area at the back there. There's a bike store, and then the boundary wall to Helier Road would be rebuilt to 1.8 metres tall to enclose the rear yard. There would be a gate in it as well, so you could get into the property through the back if you would like, rather than the front door. With respect to room sizes, the bedrooms are mostly just north of 10 square metres, a couple of slightly bigger ones, which means that the communal kitchen dining area can be 22.5 metres or upwards. This one is considerably upwards in terms of 40.5 square metres, so that very large area there. So no difficulty in officer's opinion with respect to the size of rooms and the layout of the whole property, and therefore the level of amenity to be provided. No objection to the extension in terms of effect on neighbours or the wider area. It's a flat-roofed extension there. That is the extension there to replace the existing collection of buildings. So no objection to the physical appearance or effect on amenity of either the front boundary wall nor the extension. There's the boundary wall enclosing the site in the normal manner. So there are a number of objections on the usual or the common range of matters: external space, overdevelopment, loss of family home, building works, character, public services, parking, and so on. But officers feel in this instance the standard of accommodation would be acceptable. There's not an imbalanced community resulting, so all the harmful effects would not be deemed to be sufficient to withhold planning consent. Thank you.
Right, over to you, Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you.
Should we take Simon Hill first?
Sorry, Simon, I beg your pardon. Yeah, I'm right down the bottom. We're in the middle. Simon, go ahead.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to provide deputation today. For me, Portsmouth is an unbelievably brilliant city, in my opinion, made even more exceptional by its governance, but chiefly by its residents. Please, when making this decision, do not forget that we have one of the highest populations of young people in the country, the second highest density in the country, second only to Luton. So we have lots of people, an awful lot of whom live in private rented accommodation, for which it's all over the national news that prices are going up, chiefly due to interest rate rises. For me, HMOs, very well managed, well thought out HMOs are one of the answers to that. And the reason I say that, we get our tenants from three places. Our tenants come into the city for employment. We want to attract good quality people into this city who fill the void that we have in certain sections of our job market. We get our tenants from larger properties, so people who are in a one-bedroom flat for whom sadly that's become unaffordable because of interest rate rises. A recent report on Portsmouth found that nearly 45% of buy-to-let properties had been sold over the last 3 years. So we've got a significantly diminishing amount of private rental sector accommodation, and yet there seems to be the words fighting HMOs used about fighting good quality HMOs that plug the gap in private rental accommodation in this city. If we don't do that, ultimately we end up with the residents that we so desperately need in this city leaving to vacate in other cities, or we end up with unlicensed HMOs without planning permission, because people will still ultimately need somewhere to live. So as an example, our rooms are about £700 to £750 a month. That includes all bills, whereas your typical one-bedroom flat, at the moment, I own a fair few. A lot of mine are £1,000 a month plus bills. That probably puts the total cost at double what it is to rent an HMO room. The only difference being you share a significantly larger communal space in an HMO. You've got your own ensuite as you would be in a one-bed flat. The other place we get our tenants is we get tenants who, from the 4,300 existing HMOs in the city, which is under 4% of our current housing stock, and therefore less than 10% maximum allowable, we get people coming up from lower standard non-ensuite HMOs, or simply HMOs where people have sold the property. For me, that's really important, because ultimately one of the idiosyncrasies of this planning committee, very sadly, and I completely understand why it happens, is that ultimately we're objecting to HMOs that are being deliberately and well thought out through architects in line with planning policy, through consultation with planning officers, etc., etc. People like myself are trying to provide unbelievable standard HMOs, which is reinforced by the fact that we got 100% occupancy in all of our rooms, and that we're setting standards for rent within the city. So we get our tenants from people who are already typically residents of this city, and therefore a lot of the arguments about why HMOs shouldn't be allowed are invalid, because we're rehousing people that are already in this city, just in better standards of accommodation that's more affordable and more sustainable. So, very quickly, in terms of the garage and the repurposing of that, in 1995 there was actually a planning application under reference A*10361/AA, and that, which was validated by the council in 1995, showed the building as exactly in its current state in terms of the extensions, etc., etc., etc. So, other than the permitted development loft conversion, which is being carried out, which could be carried out whether it was a C3 or C4 or sui generis property, the building is remaining no bigger than it currently is in terms of its floor area, in terms of its footprint, sorry, which is super important. We're not doing any permitted development extensions. We're just rebuilding the existing extensions in a much more sustainable material to look better, a lower height, as you will have seen very clearly from the pictures that were put on the screen. So, we're also putting loads more light in. One of the arguments against this application is not enough windows. Every single bedroom has a window. Most of them are existing windows, so if they're not suitable for an HMO, why are they suitable for the existing bedrooms that are in there? And that plan from 1995 shows the house as a 5-bedroom house. But also we've got 2 double doors going into the extension, which is just being rebuilt, and we've got 2 windows and 2 huge roof lanterns. That'd be a very light and airy, very usable space. As we heard from Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson, we've got the strictest council in the country pretty much on HMOs. I think instead of fighting HMOs, why don't we embrace high quality HMOs which are well designed, well thought out to be compliant with local policies. Secondly, you'll note the the planning officer's recommendation for approval of this application. They have recommended approval. Thirdly, you'll notice that this application is a C3 to sui gen. We've taken on board comments by people like Simon Turner about us typically going from C3 to C4, C4 to sui generis, and that's why we've done this C3 to sui generis. Although actually, personally, I think there should be a C4 to sui generis, and one of the reasons I say that is if you check the council's own database of HMOs, this property, 1 Oliver Road, is one of 3 listed in the road as an HMO. So it has previously definitely been used as an HMO. 2 key statistics in terms of this. Portsmouth currently has the ability to eat 2.9 of years of its 5-year housing supply. The addition of this property would assist in meeting that target. Secondly, we've got building regulations approval under application PF 230390, which was submitted on the 4th of April. The application is fully compliant with HMO SPD adopted in 2019, as well as the Article 4 directive from the 1st of November 2011, PCS 20 of the Portsmouth Plan, as well as assisting in meeting the national planning policy guidance under PPS 1 and PPS 3. It's very important to note this property actually does appear on the HMO database, and under the planning column there is a yes. With regards to the extension, rather than adapt the current various extensions to the property that have been added over its roughly 100-year history, we've, after consultation with the planning officer and their recommendation, decided to rebuild it exactly the same, and also to rebuild the wall on the outside of the garden. All of the rooms are fully compliant with planning officer's recommendation, and that planning should be granted. We don't currently have an HMO licence, as one is not currently required given it's not currently occupied. I would note we've never had the application for a licence refused. There's only 2 HMOs within the 50-metre radius other than this, so bringing this one in would only give 42.8%, so less than half of the permissible HMO database for this area.
Can I ask you to round up, Simon, please?
Yeah. Just to note, there's no adverse comments received from private sector housing, no objections from Highway, no objections from the contaminated land team. The 35 objections received I'll just quickly summarise those. Lack of car parking. As we know, the highways engineer was consulted on this. He's the subject matter expert, and they have said they have no objection. The overdevelopment of the site, we're not redeveloping the site other than permitted development extensions. The external space hasn't changed from its existing use. If anything, we're investing a six-figure sum into the property to significantly increase its usability and aesthetics. The house is the same character. The existing state of the property is poor. We're trying to improve that. It isn't a loss of a family home because it isn't currently a family home. The precedent for future development is already set by the policies.
And if I may bring you to an end.
Right. The last thing is just important point. It says there was previously a rejection for the 6-bed HMO. That isn't true. It wasn't rejected. We withdrew it because we consulted the HMO, the planning officer, who advised us to resubmit with under a slightly different term. Thank you. Oh, actually, last point is about waste. We hold a waste carrier's licence. We upgrade every single element of the plumbing in the property. So in terms of the point about the fact the water supply changes, the main water supply pipework in the street is significantly larger than that required, and each new dwelling doesn't actually currently impact the other in the road. And similarly, we hold a water storage tank for cold water and a cylinder of nearly 500 litres for hot water for the house. So we don't have any draw on the road supply at each point at which somebody takes a shower, for example.
All right, thank you very much for trying to head off all the points that might be raised. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm here as a representative of local residents, and there are 36 letters of objection in, and primarily I think they're on two issues. One is the over-intensification of the site, and the second is the loss of car parking. My argument would be that this is different and worse than the North End one that you've just refused. And it's different in two ways. The first is that this has a garage currently, which is being removed. So it's not as if it's a place where there is no parking available and it's on-street car parking and it remains like that. This is going in the opposite direction, removing off-street car parking and turning it into communal area of the house. So the parking standard says there should be 2 spaces provided. Actually, it's doing the opposite. It's going to provide -1 because it's 1 parking space, off-street car parking space removed. The second is that in the previous application, the applicant put in a limit of 1 person per room. The drawings here are all for double beds, so that's 16 people in 8 bedrooms. And that's a significant over-intensification, and in my view breaks our policy PCS 23 of over-intensification use of an area. So on those 2 grounds, I think it is not a normal application and it should be turned down. The current house is an absolute mess and has been left to look absolutely terrible by the landlord. But I don't think we should be in the job of rewarding bad landlords for leaving houses to decay and fall down and be a real imposition and a real annoyance to their neighbours, as you can see from the letters of objection on the planning website. So I think our duty is to look at each separate application on its own and on its own merits. And I think it's absolutely clear with this one that we have grounds for turning it down, and I would ask the committee to do so.
All right, thank you very much for your attendance today. Mr. Turner, do you want to come back on anything that's been raised by Mr. Hill or even Councillor Vernon Jackson?
Just to clarify on the point of occupation, it is proposed for, notwithstanding double beds that may be provided, the application is for 8-person house, not 16. So that is the proposal.
Right. Can we put on a condition, if the committee was minded to put it through, could we put on a condition that limits it to 8 persons? I know the licence will probably do it, but planning...
We could.
Can I ask the officer to come back on the parking point, because what was said was
All
factually
right,
incorrect?
I'll bring that up, Simon. Thank you for being keen. On the matters of the parking, I've noted the highways report. It exchanges 2 vehicles and 4 cycles for 2 vehicles and 4 cycles. Is that about the gist of it, notwithstanding the so-called garage space?
Yes, I'm not sure that they've commented on the previous garage space. I've just had a look on Google Street View just to see. I'm not sure whether or not it could have accommodated a car. I would have guessed it probably could. Yeah, so I don't know to what degree the highways officer looked at that.
We will all have to use our common sense around that. We know that many of these historic garages are too small for cars, and people simply utilise them for the white line on the street outside so they can park there. I presume the white line would be removed subsequently if there was one there.
From the street view I'm looking at, there was no white line, there was a dropped curb.
Sorry, there is a white line in the report. It says that that space will be reinstated in lieu of the garage. So if you read through the report that's been given, it says it's 1 for 1.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You can come up here if you like, you know, but yes, indeed, that's the point I was coming to. So the white line would be got rid of, and a car could actually go on that space.
Well, indeed. Yeah.
It's all right, Simon, we've got it.
If it's because the wall would be provided there, so apologies, Mr. Hill, the wall would be provided across that former garage space, so therefore there's no need for the access, ergo there's 1 space released on the street. That's correct.
Yeah, and before Simon comes in again, which you really mustn't anymore, would the drop curb be reinstated? Because this is an irritation to people, because people won't be able to cross there. It's not a proper disabled crossing point, but it catches me out by surprise when I'm walking along. No garage, you suddenly step forward, you find you're going down.
Yeah, it's common for the Transportation Department to ask for it to be reinstated, often by way of a planning condition, so that could be applicable in this case.
All right, so we can put a condition in that the pavement be reinstated. I'm sure Mr. Hill has listened to that. Okay, I walk down Oliver Road all that often, except election time. Members, any questions from yourselves? There are no questions then, so we have to move to comments. Mr. Candlish, Councillor Candlish rather.
My only comment is this is the first HMO style application I've seen where, as someone who actually cycles, I could see this as being a reasonable place to actually get a bike in and out of. If I'm assuming that the diagram shows an exit route in the outside wall.
I mean, you're right. I mean, there's no doubt that the committee welcomes high standard HMOs. And compared to the other one, you look at the 40 square metres of communal space. It gives people to breathe, even in a bigger property. We have to be driven in our decision making by the evidence that's presented to us. So in this case, the council officers say that there's no change in the car usage, no matter what the subjective views might be, nor the use of cycles. And indeed, we know that an old garage is going to be deleted, a line is going to be taken up, so you could argue there's going to be an extra on-street space. So there is, as far as I can see, no reason for rejecting this particular application, Councillor Smith. So I'm going to move the officer's report. Councillor Smith, you want to say something?
I was going to move the officer's report as well. I think it's
all right.
It's
okay,
a high standard of
right. You move it
accommodation.
and I'll second it. All right, sorry, Councillor Candlish. There we are. That's the proposition. We've moved the officer's report. All those in favour of the officer's report, the recommendation, sorry, I beg your pardon. Go back a bit, row back. Limiting it to 8, conditions limiting it to 8 persons, and noting the highway's concern that there should be cycle storage in the back. They asked for that condition to be put in their paragraph. Got it?
Yep, Councillor.
Yeah. All right.
And so we've got the 8 people occupancy condition. Did you want to have the curb reinstatement?
Yeah, and the curb reinstated.
And the water efficiency?
And the
right
water
at the start.
efficiency. Thank you very much for tidying that up for us. Right, with those conditions, members, can I see all those in favour of the report? That's 1, 2, that's Councillor Dent, Councillor Smith, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Candlish, and the Chair.
Planning permission was granted. That was unanimous.
Planning permission is granted. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Hill. Members, so we've had a bit of a slog this morning. It's now 1 o'clock. Do you want a quick break, or do you want to? Because we've got 2 more to go, haven't we? We've got Pembroke Road and Alcorn Place to go, and one is an MOD type application. The other is which involves removal of trees, which might cause some angst. And then there's Alcorn Place, which is a City Council application. Did you want a 5-10 minute break? You've had enough for the moment? All right, I hope you all come back because we're getting a bit thin. All right, thank you very much.
We need 4 of you to be here all together.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to suspend the meeting for the time being. Bear in mind, it's okay, bear in mind people will still be able to hear what we say. Is that correct?
Hopefully not, if you don't use your microphones.
All right, thank you very much indeed.
The meeting is now live.
Thank you. We'll come up to 2:15. We've got a slight refreshment break. And we're moving on to agenda item on the reports packet number 5, which is 35 Pembroke Road. And we've got the applicant, or representing the applicant, Mr. Cooper. And we all know that Councillor Ian Holder, St Thomas Ward, has called this matter in. So, Mr. Turner, do you want to go and present the report?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come back to the supplementary matters in a moment. There are a few things to go through there. But yes, 35 Pembroke Road, Portsmouth. This is an application for the change of use of a dwelling house to so-called governmental offices, including external alterations of various sorts. The application has come to committee because of the request from Councillor Holder and the number of objections. So Pembroke Road runs more or less east-west from the western end of Southsea Common across into High Street, Old Portsmouth, that linking road. The application site is there on the corner with the Pembroke Close, I think it's called, just next to it. The red edge site. The blue edge site or land is the rest in the applicant's ownership in the area, clearly MOD estate retained for residential purposes. So this is a post-war house that has been occupied for residential accommodation by military personnel in the past, and they would like to change it into an office. The office relocated from Hilsea down to this area, so that for the administration and management of MOD properties for residential accommodation. Part of the previous MOD site, the history is clear with the substantial railings and piers, gates and wall surrounding the property, which is nevertheless a post-war property, as is much of the land I showed just now recently to the rear. The site lies in, is adjacent to the conservation area. Let's check on that. Yes, it's adjacent to the Old Portsmouth Conservation Area, which sits to its west, its immediate left-hand side, effectively. So it's set back from the highway. Behind the railings, there's a privet hedge. You can see there. This is the front of the site looking directly on. Privet hedge backing the railings, and then a collection of trees within the site. They are various sorts of Norway maple. And just to the east of the site, a much larger lime, I thought it was. There's existing hard surfacing and grass on the front. So in terms of the alterations to the dwelling I mentioned, there are things like the Juliet balcony, windows and so on. The report sets out that some of these aren't development at all, some are permitted development. And so it's actually only the disabled access ramp on the eastern side and the excavation of further land for parking in the front area that are the two matters that require planning permission, as well as the change of use. So fairly square plan 1970s property with habitable room spaces downstairs and a number of bedrooms upstairs. So I mentioned the structural alterations, things like windows, replacement porch and so on. There's the access disabled ramp on the eastern side there. Otherwise, there's a collection of rooms within the proposed office. The front door and stairs here. There's a interview room, breakout space, quiet room, different uses, a hot desking area, general office, a conference room, staff rest room, storage, utility room, disability and general toilet. Downstairs, upstairs, again, a series of different sorts of meeting and interview rooms, office rooms, toilets, a couple of toilets and stores. So general office use of a post-war building. In terms of the change of use, there will be 5 employees. Office hours of more or less 8 o'clock till 4:30 Monday to Friday. And as I say, it would be for the administration of the MOD residential estate and the tenants. The last aspect, but an important aspect, is an extension of the parking area on the front, which does require the removal of some of those trees, and there is a proposed replacement scheme of planting. So I'll take you through each tree. There's a laurel here, twin-stemmed, that sits next to the garage. That's a category C. A is the best quality, down to B, C, and U. It needs to be removed in order to get the access ramp in. These 2 trees would come out. The smaller tree these are 4 maple trees on the front. The smaller tree is already suppressed by the larger tree and is poor health. I can go through the details of each one in due course should you wish. And the larger tree would also come out in order to make space for the cutting of the roots and the parking. And then the 2 fruit trees towards the front would also have to come out. New trees could be provided in the space vacated by these 2 and in space to the front and sides of the parking and indeed to the back of the property. The applicant proposes 7 trees replace the 5 that would come out. There was no objection on that basis from the city's arboricultural officer. So it's come to committee, as I say, because of a number of objections on various matters set out in the report, including the trees, security concerns, disturbance from commercial use, and so on. And then if I move you along to the supplementary matters. Now, before I forget, there's one extra verbal condition, please, that we missed out. The submission with respect to trees is acceptable and so on, but we don't actually have concrete proposals, and I wouldn't have expected them either necessarily for the exact replacements. That the applicant has referred to 7 trees, oak and sweet chestnut. The tree officer's happy with those, but we do require details of those trees, where they would go in exactly, to what standard they would go in, and a management plan to get them planted and managed through to establishment. So that's an extra condition I just would like to propose verbally, please, for trees. The second extra condition is in front of you for drainage, just to make sure that the extra parking spaces they propose would be of sustainable drainage type. That is indicated in the application already with pavoirs and the aggregate underneath and so on, the materials, but we'd like to make sure of that by attaching the condition. Then otherwise, since publication of the report, we've had 2 submissions, one from the Active Travel Officer at Portsmouth and one from the Friends of Old Portsmouth Association. So if I read out the Active Travel Officer who is involved with the School Street Initiative. The officer notes that it's not too far from St Jude's School, which is there at the top of St Nicholas Street, I think it is, about 180 metres away from recollection. The travel officer notes the building's small, and so the office might not have a huge impact on the area long term. However, any impact would not be welcomed by residents. The officer is working on implementation of the school street, which involves restrictions on external traffic during drop-off and pick-up times on Pembroke Close next door, St Nicholas Street and Penny Street. So that officer, expects some traffic displacement into Pembroke Road, at least initially. So she thinks that any extra vehicle traffic could have an impact on the area, or would have an impact, especially heavy machinery and builders' vehicles, referring also to the recent and current Southern Water works there. The planning officer response is the scale of the works is not huge. including the construction works to the building and to the excavations and laying out the parking at the front. So we don't anticipate any huge impact from the change of use and the associated development. The applicant is aware of the school street restrictions and has been asked to contact the active travel team to make sure there's coordination. So we don't feel a construction management plan is necessary. The busy times for the school are a certain time and a known time of the day, with 5 employees at the school. So while there's some overlap between the start and finish times of the school and office, there'll be a relatively low number of employees at the office and not a great deal of toing and froing, in officers' opinion. And I do note, as the travel officer mentioned, the School Street initiative is for restrictions to external traffic. So from my understanding of the School Street initiative, it would not seek to restrict existing residents and occupiers of buildings in the area. It's to stop external traffic coming through the area at school times, pick up and drop off. The Friends of Old Portsmouth have submitted their statement post-publication. I've set it out here. Point by point, they consider it's an important location with many heritage assets and designations in a predominantly residential area and with many passers-by. That is noted. They consider the railings, gates, pillars and wall are landmark features and should be locally listed, and they request that that is done as a condition of any development. The officer response is that local listing is not achieved via a planning application. That's not the correct procedure. That would be looked at separately out with this application. Point C from the Friends of Old Portsmouth, concern at parking for 13 vehicles. I think they mean they don't need so many because of the staff numbers and visiting tenants. So they're wondering, is it for commercial or service vehicles? And they ask, is the council going to provide business parking permits for on-street parking? The matter of parking is addressed in the officer report. It's not considered by the highways engineer or indeed the planning officers that there would be a material increase in traffic movements along Pembroke Road. I just don't see that for this limited office use. There is plenty of parking provided in the application, and then in my opinion there is overspill parking available on street if you wish to put a couple of pounds in the meter between 8 AM and 6 PM if you're there for an hour, and the rate goes up the longer you stay. There's concern indeed about additional traffic movements. This is a well-known speeding area. The proposal will elevate the safety issues, especially those turning in out of Pembroke House, that's the property, and Pembroke Close. Again, the highways engineer does not have a concern about traffic or parking because of the limited scale of the proposal. The Friends of Old Portsmouth note that St Jude's School is nearby. The increased traffic could affect the school's streets project. Again, we've addressed that in this supplementary matters report already. Don't think there is such a material change between the two uses to have any harmful effect. The Friends of Old Portsmouth ask about the standard weekday offices. They note they are stated, but they don't know what weekend access and overnight or weekend parking would be. Well, the hours of use are indicated as being Monday to Friday office hours, so that is what is proposed. It's not considered that were that someone to park a car or two over the weekend or something, there would be any difficulty with that for noise, amenity or highway safety. The Friends of Old Portsmouth consider there should be landscaping provided. That is indeed the case. The matter of the trees and condition 4 and the augmented details I've outlined to secure that. There was concern from the Friends of Old Portsmouth about staff or visitors smoking outside the gate, considering that would be unpleasant for any pedestrian passing by or for nearby residents, and they would like a designated no smoking area. That is beyond the realms of planning control, in my opinion, and in my opinion, a couple of people having a cigarette is not so offensive at all as to require any intervention. If there is any other regulations around smoking shelters or anything like that, then that would need to be complied with separately. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, Mr. Cooper, you've got 6 minutes, and people have been taking liberties today. difficult to control people, but if you want to stick to 6 minutes, that'd be really welcome. But if you want to go to 7, fill your boots.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the client, MOD Housing. I won't take on it very long at all, actually, because the planning officer's covered most of the things I wanted to say, and all the reports indicate that there are, apart from the general objections, we've got it covered in the application, I believe. Other than that, we'll just say that MOD, in terms of we're very aware of the school pedestrian traffic, and we would like to propose to develop a robust traffic management plan with the school and the school traffic officer. I'm not sure what the correct title is, but we're happy to do that for if the works do go ahead and for the use of the office afterwards. Planning officer, absolutely correct. There will be no usage over weekends. It's purely office hours only, and it's the property itself, Mr. Chairman, is an old Admiral's residence. That Admiral's post has gone now, and that property's been empty since 2019, as the property is not required. As the offices in Hilsey are no longer suitable, being on a first floor, the proposal is to use this office, and that would suit better the MOD estates in Hilsey, Old Portsmouth, Southsea and Eastney. And that's the reason for the application. And they're very mindful of the residents and the trees. We've offered to reduce the EV charging bays from 3 to 2 to retain tree T2. But bearing in mind, traffic officer may have something to say about that, I don't know. But also that particular tree, we propose to replace any trees taken out, as the planning officer said, but the T2 tree is suffering dieback and eventually will have to be replaced anyway. So, yeah, and we're happy to try and accommodate any restrictions put on us as well. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Which tree is suffering dieback? T2, if you can put them up.
Actually, we did ask whether or not T2 is this one, the larger of the two here. We wondered whether or not that could be retained if you didn't cut its roots here and have that parking space. T2 is a maple. It had unsympathetic crown reduction about 5 years ago. T3 underneath it is the one with the crown dieback due to shading from T2 and some brutal crown raising a few years ago. So, yeah, that one's going anyway. So, really, it was the matter of T2. It's a reasonably healthy specimen, but none of the trees are deemed the best quality by either the applicant's tree consultant or by our tree officer. So our tree officer is happy enough, because there are defects with the trees, to have new oak and sweet chestnut replacements by condition around the site.
And one moment, I'll come to you soon, John. Which trees are being retained?
This tree here. That one, yep. There's a little bit of cutaway underneath its canopy, but that's been assessed and would not be so damaging as to cause the tree to die. So that is another Norway maple that's being retained. And then all of the trees in the back. There's a protected beech and some others.
This one here, right on my head.
Yeah, so 5 are coming out. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And the 6th one is this one here?
The 6th one's for retention.
No, sick.
Sick is that one, sorry.
So we've got 1, 2, 3 trees.
That one's the sickest. The others have other defects as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out to me. I can't see it on here. Sorry, I beg your pardon, I wasn't on mic. I'm wanting to understand a green travel plan with the applicant, doesn't appear to be in the report, and the need for 13 car spaces compared to what we think are 5 staff. My point is, you know, you're coming to chop down trees in favour of car parking spaces, and it's a very difficult thing to understand.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the parking, the Highways Department have confirmed there's no set standard for non-residential parking. So we just got to take it on its own merits. Do we think, does anyone think there's too much or too little parking? It's been pointed out 13 spaces for 5 employees sounds a bit much. I think it's the applicant's choice. They would like to have enough parking spaces so that when there is, I mentioned conference rooms and so on, when there is a bigger meeting, you know, perhaps 5 members of staff and then some other people invited in for some sort of meeting, they would like to offer the parking on site. So that is their request. As you rightly say, that requires the removal of some trees. The defects with the trees are such that there is no objection from the arboricultural officer, subject to their replacement. So it's that balance you have to consider. In terms of green travel plan, the use is limited in size, so I wouldn't have expected the Highways Department to ask for such a travel plan. So really it's up to the applicant whether or not, to what degree they intend to encourage their staff to come by bike or by bus and so on, and any incentives they may give. We would require a bicycle store at least though, and that's required by condition.
Right, any members, any questions? Councillor Smith?
It was along the same lines as you. You answered the one about the parking, so thank you for that one. The other one was really just follow on from that about the trees. Was that you said at the start, category of trees A to U. I mean, missing out a few letters in between, but you know, can we get a clarification on that? And why can't we be specific about where we're going to put these trees back? It's very sort of, you said, could be provided, and it's very random. So I'd like to see a much more detailed detail on where the new trees are going to go and what the condition of the existing ones are and what needs to be taken out. Thank you.
Thank you. They've indicated that they would like to replace the 5 to come out with 7 trees, and they've indicated the species as sweet chestnut and oak, which would grow into quite large specimens. So where would they go? There would be a gap created there to the eastern side here. There's clearly some sort of space here and some sort of space there. Whether or not those species are actually the correct versions, hence we're asking for a condition to actually give it some more consideration. In principle, those are good species, they're native species and grow into good specimens. We need to think a bit more about the space available for them, both in the front and at the rear. It may be that you get more or less than the 7 indicated, and it depends also on the species, etc. So hence why we'd like to have the condition to look at it further. If members are happy to do that, you know, we may not go with those 2 species mentioned. That's further discussion, and it might not even be that number, but clearly we'll want to make sure that there is good replacement of some sort to the front and possibly even to the back. So that's really the long and short of it. But there are some defects with the current trees which you know does balance towards allowing their removal and replacement with better specimens.
Just to follow up to that, I think the residents along there, I think they like the trees. I know obviously 2 are going to have to come out because of parking bays, but I think anything to green that up was my point really along that line. They've already taken out a large bit of hedging in front of the residential part along there as well. Just recently I've noticed that that's come out. But I just think, greening that up, and we should be able to, by putting in a condition, firm up where they're going to go, I would say, at this point.
Sorry, the tree ecology report does actually give the positions of the new trees with the application.
I mean, it's very good, Mr. Cubic, to just get my attention and say you want to say something. Is the hedge still there, Mr. Turner?
Is the, sorry?
The hedge, which you running on the bottom, is that still there?
Yes, I've seen that. The reference to...
Okay. It's very lovely for everybody involved. If we could just use our mics.
I normally do, Chair,
yeah,
but
indeed.
just forgot like you did just 2 minutes ago.
Indeed. We need, and I've got to do it myself to capture all the comments because they can be critical. All right. Any? I know we're getting tired. It's a long old meeting, really, a lot of detail. Any more questions, members? Councillor Candice.
So I have a question about what's proposed for the replacement, because that area of road down by the seafront is, I think, an important green area to a lot of people, not just the local residents. Simply putting in, tiny whips of 1 metre might get you the 7 trees, but it won't be a replacement for some quite mature and larger trees. So is there any requirement for a replacement tree of any size to be put in? And secondly, just a general observation, building on Councillor Smith's comments there, that I think it feels a bit unambitious about the landscaping of the place after the change. So you're putting in all of these car parking spaces. Is permeated block kind of the stuff that looks green and grass grows up through it, or is it something different? Are there going to be any shrubs or permanent other things rather than just the tree? This is an opportunity to improve that piece in line with the policies on increasing biodiversity, because a single tree on its own actually isn't very helpful for that.
Thank you. Councillor, so you asked about the replacement trees, their size. The tree officer would seek probably heavy standard, which is just one down from the heaviest standard, which is extra heavy. So that is a good standard of tree to go in. And you've got a running start there. Mr. Cooper has said the distribution of the proposed tree is shown. I haven't got that in front of me at any rate, hence the need to make sure on the species and size and distribution. As for other shrubs, we could, if members want, to widen the landscape condition, not just to be just trees, but also other planting, so we can look at the combination of trees and shrubs and so on, without crowding the site too much. And lastly, you've asked about the blocks. No, what I've seen is not the plastic grid type thing I think you were mentioning where grass can go through. What I've seen is Grasscrete, thank you. What I've seen is as a normal pavoirs, the little paving bricks that are put down onto sand with a substrate underneath. That the drawings submitted, are permeable to at least through the pavoirs because you've got sand underneath them, between them. And there's a section through that I've seen that shows a degree of permeability. But we'd like to make sure about that to understand that better, so hence that request for that condition. But in terms of its appearance, you'd be having little pavoirs, whether they be grey or pink or whatever, but whatever they are, they'd weather to fit in my opinion.
So I guess it's a comment rather than a question. Thinking about the location of that space and its current status, which is mostly, I think, grass under trees, and we're moving it to car parking spaces, so there's a much bigger space given to non-green, I would at least ask the applicant to think about what could be done.
Any more questions? So we're going to come to comments then, and I'm not going to vote for this. I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper, you came along and did your job. This is tearing up grass and open ground, permeable ground in favour of tarmac, pavers or whatever. And we've got a big concern in this city with the water runoff. And I haven't heard any evidence that gives me confidence that the water that would otherwise have penetrated the ground through the grass and the soil would otherwise now not go into the water system, drainage system. So on those grounds alone, that I think that's poor. I'm not happy too about the trees being taken down. I accept one of them is going to have to go anyway. But the adverse impact on the street scene and the impact on the nearby conservation area will be adversely impacted by the destruction of these large and mature trees, which are important in the street scene. I think too it's very strange that we should be seeing 3 car parking spaces and tarmac or whatever, pavers, when we're trying to encourage people not to drive to work. We're trying to tell people to get on the bus. We're trying to tell people to come in, walk, cycle, or whatever. And I think this is really bad policy, and it shouldn't be encouraged. And I think for all these reasons, there is too much parking, too much concrete going in over grass under trees as described, and the loss of the trees means that I would move to refuse it. I mean, this has become employment land now, I presume, Mr. Turner, rather than residential land. And to encourage additional traffic movements into these narrow streets will also have an adverse impact on the residential amenities and have an adverse impact on the safety of road users, particularly the school. I think I put in 3 or 4 there, Simon. I mean, these things have to come off the top of your head because we're told we can't formulate them before we come here and read them out. So they do have to come off the top of your head, and I would appreciate some support in stringing them together in a more coherent way. But that's how I feel about it. That's right, having looked at the evidence, not feel, having looked at the evidence, having listened to the applicant, having listened to the officer's report, taking into account what FUPA said and the school and the active travel officer said, that is a conclusion that I have come to. That's my proposition to refuse. Any comments, Mr. Turner?
Thank you. Okay, you've identified 4 things, interrelated, some of them. The loss of trees, concern about drainage, concern about sustainable transport, and concern about traffic on the roads. Yeah. If I can give you my views, obviously we've recommended for approval, so, but on those 4 identified, let's see what members think about the trees. We've discussed that, and the facts are out there for you. Drainage, I'm not sure that would stand up. You know, with a condition in the event of approval, I think sustainable drainage can be achieved. So I wouldn't recommend that as a.
All right. So when I've seen us give permission for pavers like this in this way, they have to have the grid to capture the water at the end. Is that the sort of thing that will be having to go in?
Well, you can have a combination of things. If you've got an impermeable surface, then that runs into a drain, and then that's where it drains, and then it soaks in, for example. That's one way of doing it. Or you can have a permeable surface, which they're proposing here, so they're soaking across the whole surface, or a combination of the two. So I'm pretty sure that a technical solution can be found for sustainable
drainage.
drainage.
I'll delete that one then.
Okay, well, and then the matter of parking, yeah, members will come to a view as to whether or not they feel there's too much parking, and that gives the wrong encouragement to movement. With respect to extra traffic, I would encourage members not to use that as a reason for refusal. I think that the facility is small enough and that Pembroke Road has a fair bit of traffic. It's quite wide, but a fair bit of traffic from that end of Southsea across into Old Portsmouth. So I don't think, and the highways officer indeed doesn't think...
So we're left with two, and I'm
Yeah.
satisfied with that. All right, the trees and the whatnot. All right, members, there you go. Anybody want to second it, or anybody want to make a counter proposal, or indeed move the officer report? Councillor Vallely.
I'd like to move the officer's report, please.
So am I going to get a second? I won't be cross or anything if I don't get a seconder. Don't look like I have a seconder. So we need a seconder for Councillor Vallely's proposition to move the report. Is anybody going to second it? Well, I can't. Someone's going to have to. We can't abstain on it. We have an officer. We have to resolve the. We have to resolve it. I'm against it, and I'm very clear about that. So I'm afraid the floor is yours, members. You have to decide between you what you're going to do. What do we do at this point, Juliet?
Well, we're here to make a decision, so members will need to move forward to make a decision. We've got one motion for refusal on 2 grounds, and we've got one motion put forward on the approval, and neither have been seconded. So,
which is a strange place to be, and I've never had that before.
yes, I've not quite been in this
No.
situation before.
One moment. I think you've got to decide, members, which one you probably go with the more, and then come to a view. Councillor Dent.
That's exactly what I was doing. I will second your motion, Lee.
All right, then. You haven't got there is no seconder for the officer report. I'm most grateful for their report. It's a good report and teased a lot out. So there we are. We have one proposition, which is to... Councillor Candlish.
I believe that you have to guide me, but I believe we have to... I would have, on the same basis of coming off the fence, I would actually have seconded Councillor Vallely's...
That's all right. So would you like to do that then?
So I will formally second that, observing that we've made a lot of comments that will go into the record and be heard by the applicant.
I understand. So my one comes first, I take it.
Are you seconding Councillor Vallely's? Okay.
All right, so we've got a proposition to refuse on the grounds I described to the officers. All those in favour of the proposition that I put and described to the officers that was read back to us, please raise their hands. That is 2. All those against, please raise their hands. That is 2. So I have a casting vote.
Who's for, what about abstain? Yeah.
So it's Councillor Dent, Councillor Hunt, for Councillor Hunt's proposition, Councillor Candish and Councillor Vallely for officer. No, not yet, they haven't. They voted.
That motion's not been carried. It's two for and 2 against and 1 abstention. So we need to move on to the next motion.
Do I do a casting vote on that one?
Sorry, Chair.
I believe I do.
Sorry, Chair, yes, you do get a casting vote.
So obviously I cast it in favour of the refusal. All right? So we've resolved that matter. Apologies, sir. You have to go back and think again.
Yes, apologies, Chair.
That's all right, thank you. We'll get through it. So we come to agenda item 9 now. That is the City Council application, page 71, agenda item 9. Do you want to introduce the report, Mr. Turner?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at Unit D25 H&E Car Spares at Alcorn Place in Portsmouth. It's a change of use from a car breaker's yard, sui generis, to a waste vehicle storage Class B8 use, incorporating adjoining properties into a single planning unit, involving demolition of existing boundary walls and outbuildings and installation of security fences to west and east. Just a quick correction from the Supplementary Matters report. The officer report says the hours of operation are 0800 to 1800. Actually, that is 0500. They're up early in the mornings until 1800. Although this is described as a waste vehicle storage, perhaps better wording would have been this is a proposal for a vehicle depot for the fleet of City Council refuse collection vehicles. The application site there is edged in red. You can pick it out as the more intensively used car breakers depot presently, and edged in blue because the applicant, the City Council, owns the sites to the north and the immediate south, which is their north and south. So those two sites are already used for the same purpose, vehicle depots for the fleet of vehicles to be stored overnight, as well as some other waste storage matters like skips and so on. So in the middle of the existing operation of the two sites is the car breakers yard. The City Council would like to change the use and so incorporate all three parcels into one to provide a much more efficient and safe working environment for the city refuse vehicles. The couple of shed-type structures would be removed, the boundary walls would be removed, and the site would be secured at the front and rear with some weld mesh metal fencing. The application has come because it is a City Council application, so it needs to be determined by the Planning Committee. No objections from the Highways Officer. Public Protection asked a couple of questions about the operation of the site and so on, but I think I've already said it there. It's simply to enable the existing two uses on either side to be conjoined with some more space for a more efficient operation of the refuse collection service. Thank you.
Are you both having a go this afternoon? 6 minutes? No, I think, would they get 12 minutes between them, or was it 6 minutes, Juliet?
It's 6 minutes per deputation. But
Chair, shall I just clarify? I'm the lead officer for the council for the application, but my colleague here this afternoon is the project manager for the city refuse collection service, so she will make the representations.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey, and thank you for your forbearance this morning and this afternoon. Ashley.
I will make this quite short. Simon's already talked about a lot of what I was going to say. The council is a waste collection and waste disposal authority, and we carry out all the collections for domestic properties in the city, and we do approximately 9.3 million collections annually. As Simon showed on the screen, we operate from the units either side of this car space operation, and geographically the yard is centrally located for collections in the city and is really close to the existing waste disposal infrastructure on Quartermain Road, which is just opposite Alcorn Place. So it keeps travel time and distance for our crews and our waste collections to a minimum and improves the efficiency of our services. We've already expanded the service over recent years with the introduction of food waste collections, so we've had to temporarily relocate some of our other services, not services, but like our bin store to other places in the city, and to store the food waste vehicles in one of the other units. So expansion of the current depot to bring the service together is required, so we can operate from a single unit. There are future changes to the collection service required to meet the Environment Act 2021 and its consistency of recycling collections. So this means we're going to have to introduce more recycling rounds and have more vehicles that will need to be accommodated at the waste collection depot. So there'll be approximately 7 additional vehicles that will need to be stored and operated from the depot, but it will provide more employment opportunities and jobs in the city because we have more rounds that need to be undertaken. And the service is coming in-house from the 1st of April 2024, and the expanded depot will enable better management and operational improvements and health and safety for the crews and everyone involved. There's just some background to the service of why it's
We know it's a
come
good
forward.
service. Thank you, Ashley.
And could I just add to that, please, and say that this is a big plus for the city in the sense of its greater efficiency. The logistics, by expanding rather than moving out to perhaps the Havens area for a new site, are obvious to all of us. And in terms of the environmental improvements and carbon emissions, this is a significant gain for us. So thank you.
Much obliged to you, Mr. Harvey. Thank you. Did you want to come back on anything, Mr. Turner?
Thank you.
All right. Members, any questions, Councillor Smith?
Just a question about access and egress from the site. Is it going to be from the existing this site, or is it going to be you're going to come in from the other 2 buildings and then use the middle bit? There's no plan as to how it's going to work.
Over to you, Mr. Harvey. Ashley, rather.
A subsequent planning, if this is granted, a subsequent planning application will come and detail how it will be used, because we will change some of the welfare. The site is in need of a full refurb, so a subsequent application will come, and it will show the access and egress, but it will probably utilise the existing access points.
So will that make a change to the parking and the transport things? They say they've got no comment. When they bring in another proposal with plans as to how you're going to access and egress it, will that'll be after the event, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, they'll have to use the existing arrangements on and off the site to the 2 sites to the north and south, but if they want to then change that, we'd need to advise whether or not a further permission is required, and depending on what the other changes are that Ashley just mentioned for the welfare facilities. So no doubt they'll be in touch with us to check on what may or may not be needed in terms of a potential further application.
I can't see when it's going to be an access point where you're going to be holding vehicles, and the transport don't make any comment about transport. And
It doesn't look like that we're looking at that today.
No, in which case then you're going to come back, we're going to say yes to something, and then you're going to come back later and get further planning. I don't.
Well, my understanding is that the existing accesses to the 2 either side, that's where you can get in and off the site, and then it will become one site. So within the site, they'll be able to get onto the central piece of land, and so how they range it is up to them within the site. But as I understand it, it's using existing accesses.
But has somebody considered the additional access and egress from those other 2 sites? Somebody must have done that now, surely. If they're going to knock down the walls on the inside, I understand what's happening, but I'm just saying you must then have access and egress from those sites, and nobody's making any comment about that, and then it's going to come back later for comment once it's been done. I don't really understand that.
I think the applicant is saying, should they wish to move the access from the existing 2 access points, then they'd need to speak to us to check whether or not that needs planning permission, as well as whether or not the welfare facilities may need it. But as it stands, the highways officer would have understood what the application entails, so it's no change to the access on the application site in the middle, and you'd get to it from the existing accesses.
Chair, can I just confirm that that is indeed the case?
All right, there you go. Got your answer. Well done. Thank you for asking. Right, there being no other questions, we're going to go to comment. I'm going to move the officer's report. Just to repeat what Ashley and Mr. Harvey, Ms. Moore and Mr. Harvey have said. We know we have got a very good domestic refuse collection service, waste collection service. A lot of effort's gone into it, and it's going to be brought in-house soon. The council's looking to improve the efficiency of the service still further. So this is another stride towards that. So there we have it. We've had the debate and the arguments, the agreements. So anybody going to second it? Thank you, Councillor Smith. You got there first. So move to the vote, if that's all right. Those in favour of the officer's report, please raise their hands. That is Councillor Candlish, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Smith and Councillor Dent. I'll see you afterwards about this pronunciation, which I'm having trouble with. I beg your pardon. I think that concludes the meeting to the officers. Am I correct?
As far as I know, we've covered all the
Yeah.
items, haven't we, Simon?
Anything else, Simon? Thank you all for your help today in getting us through it. Much obliged to you. Thank you to the three new members that have stayed on, and to Councillor Smith too, making sure that we're quorate and getting through the business. Much obliged to you all. Thank you. That concludes the meeting.